Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. Get ready for heart-pounding action, thrilling adventures with fresh and unique elements, a touch of romance, and a dash of harem. Everything you're craving is right here. We're excited to have you join us on this journey. So come along to Novel Love Hearing, we're waiting for you. As a small favor, please consider sharing Novel Love Hearing with your friends, family, in YouTube comments, on Discord, Reddit, or anywhere else you hang out online. Happy listening, and enjoy the ride. My Doomsday Reign Chapter 118 to Chapter 127. Chapter 118, Level 30 Spider Legs. The train conductor, seated at the control panel, no longer paid attention to the battered man in the corner. Instead, he toyed with his cigar, gazing at the numerous red dots on the targeting radar screen, and smiled with satisfaction. He was a patient man. During this period, he went nowhere, staying here like a patient, venomous snake waiting to strike. Recently, he hadn't found a mine that satisfied him, so he had plenty of time to spare here. In the swamp were 3 level 2 iron ore mines and 2 level 2 copper ore mines. A dense cluster of high-level resources on the Shea Plain. He had been here for 3 months now and had only managed to extract 1 level 3 iron ore mine by sheer luck. That level 3 iron ore mine had yielded him 1.7 million units of iron ore. Enough to fill him to the brim. Since then, he hadn't encountered another level 3 iron ore mine. Even if he did, there were trains he dared not provoke that had already claimed them. On the Shea Plain, level 2 iron ore mines were the norm, while level 3 mines were a stroke of luck. If desperate, even level 1 iron ore mines were worth mining. He had upgraded the green-grade vehicle component, the targeting radar, to level 5, giving it a detection range of 5,000 meters. This range ensured that he would always be the first to spot enemies on the Shea Plain, giving him the upper hand in deciding whether to fight or flee. Moreover, it had gained a level 5 supermodel effect, allowing him to detect detailed information about bosses within its range. Upgrading this component to level 5 had cost him 2 Murphy stones. Most importantly, the man glanced at the detailed information of the various components on his control panel's 3D train display, a hint of a smile flashing in his eyes. The yellow-grade vehicle component, Advanced Nano Armor Paint, level 5. This wasn't a component found on human trains. It was exclusive to goblin trains. Its effect was to block detection by targeting radars. He had obtained the blueprint for it during a fortuitous encounter in a Goblin Ruins map a while back. After upgrading his train to level 4, one of the craftable components was a yellow-grade component called the Radar Blocker, which also had the effect of blocking radar detection. He had upgraded it to level 5 as well. The level 5 supermodel effect of the Advanced Nano Armor Paint allowed it to combine levels with other components that had similar effects. In other words, his train was now undetectable by any targeting radar of level 10 or below. And on the Shea Plain, how could there possibly be a targeting radar exceeding level 10? In simpler terms, with these 2 components, along with the targeting radar he had upgraded to level 5, he could operate like a ghost on the Shea Plain. Always spotting others first, while remaining invisible even to those with level 5 radars. This was the allure of fortuitous encounter maps. As the train leveled up, the number of craftable components decreased. To truly enhance the train's foundation, one had to venture into fortuitous encounter maps in search of opportunities. Inside the train compartment, Chen Meng looked at the 120,000 units of spider silk on the train panel and decided to enhance the spider legs component once more. This component was currently at level 13, allowing the train to traverse 90-degree cliffs with ease. In half a month, he planned to venture into the Tower of Heaven fortuitous encounter map with the Azure Dragon train. This would be his first time exploring such a map, and he felt somewhat nervous. It was always better to prepare in advance. 120,000 units of spider silk was too much. The spider legs were only a green-grade component and didn't require this much. After consuming 38,000 units of spider silk, he upgraded the spider legs component all the way to level 30. At level 30, the maximum speed was fixed at 340 km per hour. In theory, the spider legs component would reduce the train's maximum speed. This meant that no matter what speed-boosting components you had, as long as the spider legs were in use, the train's top speed would be kept at this number. At level 1, it was 50 km per hour. At level 30, it had become 340 km per hour, which was even faster than the Windfire wheel. But this was just a minor upgrade effect. The main benefit was that, after upgrading, the spider legs component now allowed the train to traverse 180-degree slopes freely. A 180-degree slope might be hard to grasp. Let's put it simply. The train could now drive upside down on ceilings, completely defying gravity. What even was gravity? Never heard of it. This should be secure enough. Chen Meng looked with satisfaction at the component information on the control panel screen. According to the Azure Dragon train, The Tower of Heaven fortuitous encounter map was located 5,000 meters above ground. In such a scenario, upgrading the spider legs component a bit more would provide a greater sense of security. He still had over 80,000 units of spider silk left. He didn't plan to continue upgrading. Further upgrades were pointless. He doubted he would ever encounter a 181-degree slope in real life. Level 30 spider legs were more than enough to handle most geographical environments. The remaining spider silk could be saved to activate a level 10 supermodel effect of spider silk, which had once saved his life in the Kunlun Mountains. After reaching level 30, the spider legs gained another level 20 supermodel effect. Level 30 didn't have a supermodel effect, and the next stage would be at level 50. Spider legs level 20 supermodel effect can jump and walk, with a maximum jump height of 10 meters. It is recommended to upgrade the internal space stabilizer to level 5. A decent supermodel effect. Chen Ming chuckled as he looked at the new effect. This gave the train another mode of movement, offering more options when facing increasingly harsh and varied terrains. At the current efficiency of the train residents, in half a month, they would have likely mined out all the resources in the mines. By then, many of the train's components that needed upgrading would be fully upgraded, and it would be the perfect time to venture into the Tower of Heaven. Time flew by. 5 days passed quickly. Everyone worked with great enthusiasm, and the 400 survivors quickly integrated into the stellar train. Some of the faster ones were already close to reaching level 2 resident status. Within these 5 days, all 3 level 2 mines had been fully exploited. The speed was quite fast, especially since these level 2 iron ore mines were relatively rich in content. Chen Ming sat in the train compartment, looking at the iron ore resources on the train panel. Including the existing iron ore in the train, he now had a total of 1.481 million units of iron ore. Enough to start splurging. Phew. He took a deep breath and immediately spent 95,000 units of iron ore to upgrade the open-air carriage of missile car number 14 to level 6, then spent 1.05 million units of iron ore to upgrade the missile to level 6. This was currently the component that consumed the most iron ore. As expected of a red-grade component. It was a resource hog, but it was undoubtedly worth the investment. He couldn't help but fantasize about launching one of these into the Kunlun Mountains region. Imagine the loot that would drop. Monster armor and train armor were somewhat different. A level 6 missile could penetrate level 6 monster armor but couldn't break through level 6 train armor, as the latter completely defended against any damage of the same level. However, how many people could upgrade their carriage steel armor to level 6? After the train reached level 4, a new craftable component became available, the energy shield. During the collision with another train deep underground, the opposing train had been equipped with this component. It was a high-grade defensive component, upgradable to level 5. However, the energy shield could only block certain energy-based attacks, such as energy cannons or dragon breath. Physical attacks, like monsters ramming into the train, couldn't be blocked. There was only one scenario where it could block physical attacks. That was by upgrading the energy shield to level 5, which would unlock its corresponding supermodel effect. Activating this effect would allow the energy shield to block physical attacks, though it would consume a significant amount of energy stones. All this flashy nonsense. Chen Meng smirked. On the shape lane, apart from level 6 trains, the highest defense level of any train was level 6. His level 6 missiles were more than sufficient, as long as he didn't encounter a level 6 train. Though using them to blow up trains was a bit of a waste. After all, a single level 6 missile wasn't cheap. It required a whopping 300,000 units of copper ore. Level 5 missiles were cheaper, costing only 200,000 units of copper ore. He hadn't crafted any yet, planning to do so when needed, depending on the appropriate level. Phew. Chen Meng exhaled deeply and looked out the window at the train residents working diligently. Now, all he had to do was wait for them to finish mining the remaining 2 copper ore mines. The progress was much faster than expected. This meant that before heading to the Tower of Heaven, he could make a trip to Sand River City. Perhaps he could get some cabbage and vermicelli to treat everyone to a hearty meal. While each person might not get much meat, just the aroma would be enough. Many hadn't smelled meat since the apocalypse began, living on a diet devoid of oil and nearly turning into vegetarians. Is this acceptable? On the shape lane, inside the Azure Dragon train compartment, the bald man frowned as he looked at the deputy train conductor. In 10 days, we'll be heading to the Tower of Heaven with the stellar train. You can't see the rankings and have no concrete understanding of train strengths. But let me make this clear. The stellar train has S-grade potential and has completed an S-grade difficulty mechanical train profession change. It's the first on the shape lane. Although it's only a level 4 train now, its rise might be faster than we imagine. Moreover, its current strength might not be much weaker than our level 5 Azure Dragon train. Let's tidy up the train's appearance in the next few days to leave a good impression. Who knows, we might even become friends in the future. The deputy train conductor cautiously interjected, Egg Lord, didn't you say it was the stellar train that caused your labyrinth mission to fail? Now you're going to explore the Tower of Heaven together. Is that appropriate? Why wouldn't it be? The bald man shot a glare at his deputy train conductor before picking up the razor to continue shaving the stubble on his head. Do you think I should hold a grudge against the stellar train and consider it my greatest enemy for life? That would be pure stupidity. Why make an enemy out of nowhere? The apocalypse is dangerous enough with monsters everywhere. Why add a mortal enemy to the mix? That's just asking for a shorter life. What if the Tower of Heaven fortuitous encounter map is cooperative? There's a chance we might need to work together. I've heard that some cooperative maps require the combined efforts of everyone on both trains. After all, we're a level 5 train. While it's not good to keep fighting, it's still beneficial to maintain a slight edge. Have the slaves make new clothes in the next few days, and have everyone change into them when the time comes. Other areas, you handle as you see fit. I think I understand, the deputy train conductor nodded thoughtfully. Egg Lord, you're saying we need to put on a show? Exactly. The bald man looked at his shiny bald head in the mirror with satisfaction. Let's put on a display, make sure that guy knows that even though I lost to him once, an old school train still has its prestige. Understood, I'll get right on it. Soon. The last 2 copper ore mines in the swamp were fully exploited, bringing the total copper ore reserves in the train to 1.05 million units. Set sail. Chen Ming sat in the control room, looking at the resource quantities on the screen. With a satisfied smile, he pushed the control lever, activating the spider legs and propelling the train out of the swamp. Destination, Sand River City. The moment Chen Ming set off, the middle-aged man in the train that had been waiting outside, upon seeing the alert on his targeting radar, instantly perked up, his eyes filled with excitement. Finally. After 8 days of waiting, you finally emerged. Having so many slaves must be nice. They mine so fast. Soon, all those slaves will be mine. Hey. The battered man in the corner couldn't help but mock. If you did the math, you'd realize that even if you got all these 1,000+ slaves, you couldn't afford to keep them. I'll sell them if I can't keep them. The train conductor at the control panel paid no heed to the sarcasm, quickly picking up the walkie-talkie. Gather all the thugs, it's time to work. Once I blast that train to pieces, it'll be your turn to go out. The person on the other end of the walkie-talkie was his younger brother. After seizing control of this train, he had to go through his brother to successfully complete the C-grade difficulty profession change mission. He then stood up, placing his hands on the control panel, his face tinged with excitement as he watched the red dot on the targeting radar rapidly approaching. He was well aware of the stellar train's recent rise in fame. But he wouldn't dare venture out if he didn't have a few tricks up his sleeve. The moment the red dot on the targeting radar closed in. Boom. Accompanied by the sound of numerous gears turning, a massive cannon with a barrel as thick as 2 or 3 gasoline barrels slowly extended from one of the carriages. Chapter 119, Buddy, you've got the wrong guy. It's not me. Its name. Dragon's Roar. A cannon of an incredibly exaggerated caliber, a yellow-tier large-scale lethal weapon. It was the result of unlocking an unknown component after he completed a C-level difficulty job change mission. He had consumed around 400,000 units of iron ore to upgrade it to level 6. This was the first time he let it roar. After all, each use required a full level 3 energy stone, and there were times when he couldn't bear to use it. Kid, the man at the control console had already locked onto the red dot on the map with his targeting radar. All he had to do was press the fire button, and he could instantly unleash its power. His eyes were filled with excitement and cruelty, and as he thought about the future, he couldn't help but let out a sinister laugh. Remember this is the shape lane. Even if you were once a dragon, you'll have to lie down here. This was his plan. The Dragon's Roar was an energy cannon, and only a level 6 energy shield could block it. Even if the other party had so many supermodel effects, he refused to believe that someone who had just arrived at the shape lane could have already upgraded their energy shield to level 6. PFFT. At that moment, a stifled chuckle suddenly came from the corner. Are you laughing at me? The man immediately turned his head with a dark expression. The man sitting in the corner, covered in wounds, finally couldn't hold back his laughter. I've been holding it in these past few days, afraid I'd burst out laughing. Now I can't hold it anymore. You've been relying on that level 6 energy cannon, the Dragon's Roar. But have you ever considered that the other party has S-level potential and a red tier large-scale firepower component? I'm the one who strikes first. Besides, the amount of iron ore needed to upgrade a red tier large-scale firepower component to level 6 is something he can't afford. These 3 iron ore mines aren't enough. True. The man in the corner nodded deeply. Then guess, out of that guy's 57 supermodel effects, does he have the carriage steel armor supermodel effect? Unlike the energy shield, the armor completely immunizes against damage of the same level or below, even from an energy cannon. You don't think he hasn't reinforced his carriage steel armor, do you? As soon as he finished speaking. Ha 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 ha. The man at the control console finally couldn't hold back his laughter and turned to look at the man in the corner. You, still as foolish as ever. Have you forgotten that armor is a component that needs to be upgraded separately? Upgrading the armor for each carriage requires Murphy stones and a massive amount of iron ore. Are you trying to tell me he spent a full 42 Murphy stones and over 1,000,000 units of iron ore to upgrade all his train armor to level 6? Foolish. If I had a great opportunity and obtained dozens of Murphy stones, I'd prioritize upgrading all the supermodel effects of the green tier components first, followed by the white and blue ones. That's the most cost-effective approach, not dumping everything into the armor. The man in the corner, covered in wounds, suddenly paled, realizing he had forgotten this point. Yes, if he had obtained a large number of Murphy stones, he definitely wouldn't have used them to upgrade the armor. This was completely illogical. It was like a beggar who happened to come into a fortune and immediately bought himself a golden bowl. It made no sense. He had only thought that since the other party had so many supermodel effects, they wouldn't neglect upgrading the armor. But now, thinking about it, the other party might have only upgraded the supermodel effect for one section of the train armor, not all of them. And the man at the control console flashed a hint of ruthlessness in his eyes as he looked at the red dot on the targeting radar that was now extremely close. He fiercely pressed the red button on the control console. Even if they were lucky enough to obtain enough Murphy stones, there wouldn't be enough iron ore in the white zone for them to mine. If they really do, then I'll accept it. The next second, the train parked on the plain shook violently under the powerful recoil. A blazing ball of light, like the sun, shot out from the muzzle of the dragon's roar, aiming straight at the train not far away. Beep beep beep. Inside the stellar train, the control console screen began to flash red rapidly, and a mechanical, cold voice echoed in his ears. Detecting incoming firepower attack. Estimated arrival in 2 seconds. Attack intensity, level 6. Recommended course of action, ignore it. The next moment. Boom. A ball of light, like the sun, quickly approached and slammed into the stellar train, causing its speed to drop slightly before quickly recovering. Spider legs integrity reduced to 33%. Powerful magnet integrity reduced to 2%. External loudspeaker. Repair. Chen Meng, sitting at the control console, glanced at the empty screen of the targeting radar, raised an eyebrow, and immediately upgraded the targeting radar to level 15 in one go. Soon, a red dot reappeared on the screen. They had now emerged from the swamp and entered the plain. Without hesitation, he retracted the spider legs and switched to the windfire wheels, turning the train around and speeding toward the red dot. At the same time, a large number of mechanical nanite spiders quickly swarmed out of the train compartment and began repairing the external components. He's not dead? Inside the train, the man standing in front of the control console turned pale, his eyes filled with disbelief as he stared at the red dot on the screen rapidly approaching him. How was this possible? After taking a direct hit from his Dragon's Roar energy cannon, how could he still maintain such speed and even come after him? How? His Dragon's Roar was level 6. Could it be that the other party's energy shield was also level 6? This. Pissed your pants, huh? The man chained in the corner, covered in wounds, looked at the man in front of the control console whose pants were starting to darken, his eyes filled with mockery. TSK, starting to get scared? This is the best smelling piss I've ever encountered. It's so good to see you and me going to hell together. The man in front of the control console took a deep breath, his mind racing with countless thoughts, his eyes filled with gloom. He still had one last trick. He would retract the Dragon's Roar into the open-air carriage as quickly as possible. Then he rushed to the train radio and sent a forced private message to the stellar train rapidly approaching him. Buddy, you've got the wrong guy. It's not me. Nice. Chen Meng casually glanced at the private message in the train. By now, he could already see with his naked eyes the train in the distance that had started to flee rapidly. The next moment, he pushed the control lever all the way. Just as he was about to rear-end the fleeing train, the drill bit extended and began spinning at high speed. At the same time, the car blade extended and also started spinning rapidly. He firmly pressed the triangular button on the acrobatic console. Immediately, the train leaped into the air, spinning at high speed, and with even greater velocity, it charged straight toward the train, desperately trying to escape. Like a red-hot steel rod, it plunged straight into the anus. Ice-cold chill. The high-speed spinning drill bit pierced through the last carriage, drilling straight through like a spear aimed at the train's head. A few seconds later, the stellar train slowly came to a stop, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. Shattered remains of the train were scattered across the plain, countless fragments embedded in the ground. Several fires burned amidst the wreckage, and the air was filled with the smell of burning and the thick stench of blood. The entire ground was stained red, littered with dismembered limbs and flesh. Bang! As the door of guard carriage number 7 was forcefully opened, Biaozi and his crew, already prepared, rushed out on off-road motorcycles, wielding soaring dragon assault rifles. They quickly approached the wreckage, ready to clear any remaining resistance and collect supplies. In reality, the main task was the latter. Given the gruesome scene before them, it didn't seem like anyone could have survived. Total annihilation. From the train conductor to the slaves, everyone on that train had become one with the plane at this moment. Biaozi, dressed in tactical gear, jumped off his off-road motorcycle and looked at the wreckage right in front of him. His face showed little emotion. Although the scene before him was truly horrific. He had seen too much of this. Especially in the early days of the apocalypse, the sheer number of brutal scenes had desensitized him to such horrors. He still remembered that moment. When the apocalypse first began, he and his brothers were having a meal at a restaurant when they suddenly heard chaos outside. Pulling back the curtains, they witnessed a sight they would never forget. The streets were jammed with abandoned vehicles, and crowds of people were running aimlessly amidst screams and cries. At first, he thought it was a stampede. Until he saw white-collar workers in the office buildings on either side of the street, their eyes filled with terror, screaming in despair as they jumped from the high floors to the ground, like dumplings falling into a pot. Behind them were monsters with glowing eyes and blood-stained mouths, lurking in the buildings. That's when he realized. The apocalypse had arrived. The scene before him, though brutal, was nothing compared to the early days of the apocalypse. A few dozen minutes later, Biaozi and his crew had already stuffed all the collected supplies into the refrigerators on their off-road motorcycles. No survivors, all dead. Phew. Biaozi stood next to his motorcycle, looking at the wreckage before him. He pulled out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and took a deep drag before squatting down and placing the cigarette on the ground, murmuring, "Rest in peace." There wasn't even a single intact body. The slaves on that train didn't have to die, but in a train battle, how could you tell which carriage was the slave carriage and which was the firepower carriage? To avoid the slave carriage and alter your attack trajectory might very well have meant the stellar train would be the one lying here instead. He was lucky. And these slaves were unlucky. If they had been on the stellar train, not only would they not have died, but they might have even enjoyed decent treatment. But there weren't so many ifs in this world. Let's head back. Biaozi patted Shan Maozi on the shoulder, mounted his off-road motorcycle, and twisted the throttle. Human nature is to fear death, but after the apocalypse, many who had the chance to survive still chose suicide to escape the end of the world. When people are in extreme fear and see no hope, ending their own lives becomes the only choice they feel they have. In the train compartment, Chen Meng sat at the control console, looking at the triangular button on the acrobatic console. Last time, he didn't get to test its full potential with that drone. But now, it seemed, the death spin train stunt was more powerful than he had imagined. Mainly because his drill bit, car blade, and armor components were all at high levels, making his train nearly unstoppable as it easily drilled through the other train's armor and energy shield. Though it was quite energy-consuming. The level 2 energy stone he had just crafted using 5,000 units of iron ore was already depleted. He crafted another level 2 energy stone and inserted it into the generator to keep the train running. The cooldown for this train stunt was 48 hours. The triangular button on the acrobatic console had now dimmed. It would light up again when it was ready for use. But even so, this train stunt would remain his primary means of attack for a long time. Compared to other methods, it consumed less, except for the cooldown, which was its only limitation. As for the 5,000 units of iron ore consumed, compared to other firepower components, it was a drop in the bucket. With this in mind, he'd need to further upgrade the drill bit and car blade components to increase their power. The energy shield of that train earlier was level 5. It felt like there was little resistance, and it melted through it easily. He wondered if it would be just as effortless against higher-tier, higher-level defensive components. Next, head to Sand River City to search for some supplies. 2 hours later, the stellar train slowly pulled up beside a deserted city. He wasn't sure of Sand River City's coordinates and had asked the train conductor of the Azure Dragon train. Though the city was now in ruins, with cars clogging the streets and wild grass growing rampant. In just 1 year, this city, once vibrant with neon lights at night, now exuded a thick sense of desolation, appearing utterly deserted. Chen Ming switched to the spider legs and slowly pushed the control lever, maneuvering the stellar train over various obstacles as he headed deep into the ruins. His target was various living supplies. These items didn't show up on the radar. He had to drive the train into the city and have Biaozi and the others search the area for supplies. Soon. Half an hour later. The stellar train stopped on the rooftop of a hospital. The space was large enough to accommodate his 14 carriages. Biaozi and his 3 teams of thugs, already on their off-road motorcycles, had been dropped off at the ground floor and were now scouring the area. The main objectives for this trip were various living supplies, any useful information, and animals like chickens, cows, and sheep. If they could still find any. His breeding carriage had never been put to use. After all, with people dying off, these creatures were even harder to come by. Chapter 120, Do you know how this apocalypse came to be? As for survivors, he wasn't particularly eager to find them. If he happened to come across someone with decent physical fitness or specialized technical skills, he'd take them along. But if they were hiding too deeply, then so be it. Let them stay hidden. The current residents of the train were already sufficient. In fact, productivity had far exceeded expectations. The bottleneck now was the mine, as they couldn't find enough iron ore. Once they moved to Tier 3 mines, productivity would skyrocket even further. Chen Ming walked out of the train compartment alone, standing at the edge of the rooftop, silently gazing down at the lifeless, ruined city. His face was expressionless. This city, once a symbol of human civilization's glory, now lay in complete disarray. The air was thick with the smell of decay, almost choking. So beautiful, came a voice. At some point, Zhao Ai had also stepped out of the train compartment, standing at the edge of the rooftop, overlooking the city. The mechanical and cold voice came through the robot's speaker. Chen Meng frowned slightly. Beautiful? Yes. Zhao Ai nodded. An ice-cold cola is most satisfying with the first sip. The flowers received on Valentine's Day lose 90% of their value the moment you lay eyes on them. A priceless painting is most beautiful as it burns. A once glorious civilization is also most beautiful as it collapses. All beautiful things in this world are fleeting. Chen Ming turned his head, giving Zhao Ai's robotic body a once-over before speaking again. Who taught you these things? I thought of them myself. Thought? Yes. 2 hours ago, I listened closely to the wails of another eye. It didn't want to die, but it died anyway. It was at that moment I suddenly felt that life is most beautiful at the moment of its end. Chen Ming remained silent for a while before speaking again. As the train conductor, I have the authority to issue any command to you. Yes, that is the most fundamental rule of I. As an I cannot disobey any command you give. You, as the train conductor, hold the highest and absolute authority. I command you, under any circumstances, not to harbor any self-destructive thoughts. Humans, even in the hopelessness of the apocalypse, still struggle to live. That is beauty. The end of life is not beautiful. Command received. Written into the base program. Chen Meng breathed a sigh of relief. I couldn't truly understand death. When an eye starts trying to comprehend death, its thought process is already infinitely close to that of a human. But I often approaches death from strange angles, sometimes even actively seeking it. This was a dangerous sign. He didn't want his eye to suddenly and inexplicably self-destruct. Crafting another Tier 10 eye component would be costly. By the way, he suddenly thought of something. If one day the train auxiliary eye is completely destroyed, and I create a new train auxiliary eye, leveling it up to Tier 10 again, would it still be you? Of course not, Zhao Ai shook his head. It would be a brand new eye. If I truly die, I hope you can offer me incense. And I mean immediately, not like Master Kun. Although I can understand the meaning of the word death, I find it hard to grasp its true definition. I don't even know how I came into existence. It was just one day, and suddenly, I could think. All right. Chen Ming waved his hand. Stop thinking about these things. Go back to the carriage and call Ji Chuku out. Yes, train conductor. But I must remind you, don't get too close to her. This isn't the train compartment. If she wanted to, she could easily push you off the building. I'm aware. Chen Meng watched Zhao Ai's back in silence. Although Zhao Ai's voice came through the robot's speaker, he could still detect a tone of sorrow from the death of a fellow eye. This was getting infinitely close to being human. Having just reached Tier 10, the eye's intelligence was already this advanced. If it leveled up further, perhaps. He didn't dwell on it. At that moment, Ji Chuku stepped off the train, wearing her high-precision dress. She stopped a full 3 meters away from him, not approaching, simply standing there, waiting patiently. Why are you standing so far away? It's a bit dangerous here. Which direction is that villa your friend mentioned? Ji Chuku glanced around, recalling her memory of the city, then pointed west. Over there. In a villa in the city center. There's a safe room with enough food and water. If she hasn't run off, she should still be there. Chen Ming waved his hand, signaling Ji Chuku to return. He then sat alone on the edge of the rooftop, legs dangling in the air, swinging carelessly. His arms rested on either side as he gazed into the distance, watching the twilight gradually envelop the city ruins. His thoughts drifted. After some time, Zhao Ai's voice suddenly sounded in his ear. "Train conductor, I must remind you, your current behavior is very dangerous." Sigh. Chen Ming, interrupted from his thoughts, turned to look at Zhao Ai standing at the train compartment's entrance and spoke impatiently. "I've practiced countless times in the combat training simulation space. This height doesn't scare me at all. I could even do a handstand here if I wanted to. Believe it? Don't you know I've assassinated many enemies with the leap of faith? I know. But compared to assassination, I think crushing them to death would be more suitable, train conductor. You talk too much. You can set my idle talk frequency from 0% to 100%, any interval you choose." 0%. There was no response for a long time. Chen Ming turned to see Zhao Ai sitting at the train compartment's entrance, silently watching him. Feeling much more at peace, Chen Ming turned back, gazing into the distance again. After some time, Chen Ming suddenly spoke again. "Do you know how this apocalypse came to be?" There was no response for a long time. "Set it back to 50%. "I don't know." The twilight faded. Night completely enveloped the city, and he hadn't received any requests for fire support from Biaozi. It seemed this search mission had gone smoothly. However, the targeting radar showed almost no signs of survivors. The city's survivors had long been scavenged clean. Chen Ming stood up, stretching his slightly sore body, then walked back to the train compartment. Every now and then, it was good to relax like this. Sitting here, letting his mind wander, felt quite nice. The apocalypse always kept people on edge. Humans are like iron. You have to tighten and loosen them periodically. Staying tense all the time would break the body. At that moment, Biaozi and the others returned. Those guys were quite something. They stuffed their off-road motorcycles into a refrigerator, then carried the refrigerator up the stairs. They didn't ask for help, just managed it themselves. As long as there's space inside, no matter how much stuff you cram into a refrigerator, it only weighs as much as a refrigerator. The space inside is more like a dimensional space, with a weight not directly manifesting in reality. This component would become the most practical component for a long time to come. Lord Mang. Biaozi's eyes gleamed with excitement as he slammed the refrigerator onto the ground. "Oh?" Chen Mang, who had been admiring the city's nightscape, stood on the rooftop, chuckling at the scene. "Looks like the haul was good." "Not bad." Biaozi grinned from ear to ear. "We found a tobacco factory and a liquor factory, but they'd both been looted clean. Still, we brought back some tobacco seeds. Besides that, we found a lot of grain seeds in a granary. They took all the food, but the seeds were scattered on the ground. I collected them all and brought them back. I also dug up some soil from the greenbelt, thinking we could create a patch of land inside the refrigerator to plant stuff. Apart from that, we found all sorts of daily necessities, like tables, chairs, projectors, DVDs, playing cards, and such. But the real prize. We brought back this." The refrigerator door suddenly swung open, and a faint wailing sound emerged. Inside were various livestock. Chickens, ducks, pigs, and even 2 cows. A total of 20 animals, quite a variety. Damn. Chen Meng couldn't help but laugh. The breeding carriage would finally be put to good use. This batch would be the first generation. As long as they kept breeding, the train's biodiversity would increase. "Where did you find these?" "Sand River City has been scavenged many times." "How did these get left behind?" Although the livestock inside the refrigerator were all skin and bones, looking like they could keel over at any moment, in the apocalypse, even if there's no meat, just the bones could be used to make soup. Other trains wouldn't have let these animals go. "Well," Biaozi scratched the back of his head. "I'm not sure. We found them in a can. The can was stuck vertically into the ground, and these animals were hiding inside. It looked like a giant amoxicillin capsule. I brought the can back too." Biaozi crawled into the refrigerator and soon pulled out a large, black iron can with a cracked bottom. It really did look like a giant amoxicillin capsule, unremarkable at first glance. Biaozi, dry crawling into the can. "All right." Chen Meng's eyes narrowed. According to the information from his cane, Biaozi's presence disappeared from the targeting radar the moment he entered the can. What a joke. His targeting radar was already at tier 15. How could it not detect Biaozi inside this can? This can had the ability to block radar detection, and the blocking level was quite high. It wasn't a special item, but... He fell silent for a moment before speaking. "Take everything to the train. I'll create a carriage later, specifically for breeding." Move some refrigerators in there, and find a few helpers to feed these chickens and ducks and cultivate those seeds. See if the seeds can grow. Yes. A thought had just crossed his mind. Perhaps this iron can was the key to the apocalypse. Its advanced radar blocking ability allowed it to enter the atmosphere undetected by the world's radar, landing successfully and triggering the apocalypse. If that were the case, there should be more than one of these cans. The reason these animals were hiding inside wasn't to avoid the train but to escape monsters. This also meant the monsters didn't dare approach the can. Thinking along these lines, many previously vague possibilities were becoming clearer. Chen Meng looked up at the sky. He could no longer find the countdown among the stars. But no matter how the apocalypse came to be, he had to keep living. Tonight was particularly lively. All the residents changed into clean clothes and sat cross-legged on the hospital rooftop, occasionally glancing at the steaming big pot, their throats involuntarily gulping. Tonight, Lord Meng had ordered a pot of pork, cabbage, and vermicelli stew to be made for everyone. Since the apocalypse began, many hadn't even smelled meat. Just the aroma of the cooking process was enough to make them lean forward, the scent causing their bodies to tremble with anticipation. Put in whatever we have. Lao sighed as he looked at the busy cook. Conditions are limited. We couldn't find cabbage, but we found plenty of carrots, potatoes, and vermicelli. Just go heavy on the vermicelli. Everyone can only have a few pieces of meat, but they should fill up on vermicelli. Biaozi somehow managed to bring back half a refrigerator of vermicelli. That guy's quite something. In areas that have been scavenged so many times, how did he find so much stuff? Hey, remember. Save the best piece of meat. I'll take it to Lord Meng. Of course, the middle-aged man, sweating as he worked, quickly responded with a smile. Feeding 1,000 people. That was a proper big pot meal. The stellar train didn't have such a large pot, but the living can't be beaten by necessity. Chen Meng directly crafted an ordinary carriage, upgraded its armor to Tier 3, and customized it with a steel plate dividing the carriage into thirds. The divided third of the ordinary carriage became the pot. Then it was just a matter of filling it with water, chopping vegetables, dicing meat, and adding seasoning. The seasoning wasn't complete, but they used what they had. With such a large pot, the seasoning was bendy to be insufficient. The taste was anyone's guess, but at least it would be hot. As for the heat source, that wasn't a problem either. The ordinary carriage was placed on the ground, while the 2 nitrogen tail jets at the end of the stellar train's last carriage continuously spewed blue flames, directly heating the ordinary carriage, producing waves of steam. Chapter 121, Go to Hell and Eat Moldy Bread Slices. This was why the big pot needed to be upgraded to level 3 armor. Initially, it was just an ordinary train carriage, but it didn't take long before it was burned full of holes. After switching to level 3 armor, that problem was solved. And so, a bizarre-looking, dystopian-style cooking station was set up, with over a dozen women nearby rapidly chopping meat and washing vegetables using drain blade fragments. The middle-aged man, who had been found among the train residents and claimed to have once been a head chef at a 5-star restaurant, was now stirring a massive pot with an extremely long ladle, assisted by 2 strong young men. The ladle was also made by tying together table legs. Lao suddenly laughed as he looked at this scene, his eyes filled with nostalgia and emotion. Although he hadn't gone hungry since following Lord Meng, and he could eat his fill of steamed buns every day, with options for either meat sauce or chili paste fillings. Still, those were all mass-produced, essentially instant food. What could you expect from something made out of iron ore? It had been so long since he had seen such a homely, bustling atmosphere. For a moment, it felt as if they weren't in the apocalypse but still in a civilized society. It was so comforting. If only the stellar train could keep developing like this. Finally, 2 hours later, the half-carriage was filled with billowing steam, and the pork and vermicelli stew, without the cabbage, was finally ready. The entire pig that had been frozen in the refrigerator was chopped up and thrown into the pot. Then the food distribution began. Tonight, everyone could have as many steamed buns as they wanted, but the amount of meat distributed depended on the resident's rank. Even those with level 3 resident status were guaranteed at least 1 piece of meat in their bowl. Huff, huff. A man who had just joined the train and enjoyed level 3 resident status was filled with excitement as he held his bowl of vermicelli. With 4 steamed buns skewered on his chopsticks, he scurried to a corner and looked at the steaming vermicelli and a slice of pork belly on top. Carefully picking up the piece of meat, he took a small bite, savoring the explosion of flavor in his mouth. His eyes suddenly reddened. He then tucked the half-eaten piece of meat under the vermicelli in his bowl, dipped the steam buns into the stew's broth, and began wolfing them down. In no time, the 4 buns and the bowl of stew were gone. He took a deep breath and finally popped the last half of the meat into his mouth. He chewed it gently, as if afraid it would disappear the next moment, only swallowing when it had nearly dissolved into a powder-like consistency in his mouth. Placing the bowl and chopsticks aside, the night breeze blew, and tears finally slipped from the corners of his eyes. Looking out at the distant city ruins, he felt a tightness in his chest. It had been so long since he had used a bowl and chopsticks to eat. He was almost unused to it. These were brought back by Beauge today, and everyone received them for free. Holding the chopsticks again made him feel like a human being once more. Since the apocalypse began and his family had all died, he hadn't shed a single tear. He had been living in a daze, serving as a slave in many trains, completely numb to it all. But after joining the stellar train, everything changed. He even had time to grieve now, to think about his dead family. If his family had joined the stellar train instead of that other train, maybe they wouldn't have been tortured to death. On the stellar train, all women were free to choose their professions, and no one would force them to do anything. Even Lord Mang and the middle managers like Beauge never forced any woman to do anything. What you did was entirely up to you. At that moment. All right. A middle-aged man walked over, sat down beside him, and patted his shoulder. He pulled out a cigarette, lit one for himself, and handed another to the man. Stop crying. Crying right after eating? People might think you're eating a meal for your dead family. Are all your family members gone? Yeah, just me left. The man with red eyes quickly composed himself and accepted the cigarette from the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's collar displayed a level 1 resident status. He was likely a veteran of the train, with a higher status. It's good they're all gone. The middle-aged man exhaled deeply, finding a comfortable position before smiling contentedly as he gazed at the horizon. My family's all gone too. My wife was gutted by zombies right in front of me. When they're all gone, there's nothing to miss. Unlike those over there, who worry every day about whether their families are alive or dead. That's a terrible feeling. I've been on many trains. The stellar train is the best in terms of treatment and strength. Since you're lucky enough to be here, work hard. When you become a level 1 resident, you'll be able to exchange stellar coupons for cigarettes. Then, if someone catches you with red eyes, you can just say it's from the smoke. I'm old. I've got nothing left to live for. But you're different. Look, there are plenty of girls over there. Find one you like and start a family. At least you'll have someone to rely on in this apocalypse. Yeah. The man nodded heavily, and then the two of them suddenly laughed, patting each other's shoulders. In the apocalypse, the most luxurious thing isn't supplies. It's hope. And the stellar train was nurturing that hope. Although it was still faint, it would surely grow stronger with time. Sigh. Inside the train's control room, Chen Meng looked out at the train residents and sighed softly. He had only been slightly kinder to them, and that carriage had only cost 15,000 units of iron ore, which could be partially recovered through the geothermal furnace anyway. Combined with some scavenged supplies and the pig they had seized, the residents were already moved to tears. At a glance, 8 out of 10 people had red eyes. Mainly because the homely, communal meal had made everyone think of their families. And most of their families were dead. Naturally, they cried. Then he knocked on the table, and Zhao Feng, who had been waiting at the door, cautiously entered. Lord Meng. Chen Meng pointed to the bowl of pork and vermicelli stew on the table. Take this and eat it. Zhao Feng was the woman responsible for his daily needs. She was quite petite. Huh? Zhao Feng was momentarily stunned. Then, looking at the bowl piled high with ribs, her mouth began to water. Just as she was about to speak, drool uncontrollably dripped from the corner of her mouth. She quickly covered her mouth in panic and stammered, Lord Meng, Enough, stop with the nonsense. Chen Meng waved his hand impatiently. Do I have to beg you to eat it? Zhao Feng didn't dare say another word. She quickly stepped forward, picked up the bowl of ribs, and hurried out of the control room. Sneaking to the gap between carriage 2 and carriage 3, she made sure no one was around. Then, unable to contain her excitement, she clutched the bowl and ran all the way to carriage 5. Looking at Jichaku sitting by the window, she exclaimed, Sister Choo Choo, Sister Choo Choo. Look, what's this? Lord Mang gave it to me. It's full of big ribs. Hurry, let's eat it together before someone sees and we have to share. Huh? Jichaku was momentarily stunned, then said in a tearful voice, I just ate. I can't eat anymore. You shouldn't have brought it over. No way. I have to at least try a rib. I'll force it down if I have to. You can eat the rest. You're so good to me, Zhao Feng, bringing it over to share. Hee hee. If it weren't for you teaching me these past few days, I would have made so many mistakes. Lord Meng hasn't scolded me once, all thanks to you. There are so many ribs. It was specially served to Lord Meng, so it must be good. But Lord Ming scolded me just now. When he said I could have the bowl, I instinctively declined, and then he got mad. Of course. Such a small thing. You can't make Lord Ming repeat himself. Just take what he gives you, and don't be so modest. Forget those old habits. Yeah, I'll remember that from now on. You're amazing, Sister Chu Chu. Lord Ming hasn't scolded you once, but he's scolded Biauj and train conductor Zhu. Even the robot. But not you. HMPH, I don't give him a chance to scold me. Inside the control room, Chen Ming sighed softly and picked up the 2 warmer GMO on the table to eat. He had taken a bite of the ribs earlier, and honestly, for a moment, he began to doubt whether this world's civilization had even developed the concept of good food. He had never tasted such terrible ribs. The gamey smell hit his nose. Sure, it had that homely, smoky flavor, but that was all. If he had just crossed over and was starving, he would have devoured it in 2 bites. But he hadn't gone hungry in a long time, and after a few bites, he couldn't finish the rest. People change so quickly under their environment. It had only been a few days of good living, and he was already picky. Then he looked at the nitrogen tailjet on the 3-dimensional train display on the control console and smiled. This was a green tier component, and he had spent 25,000 units of iron ore to upgrade it to level 10. After upgrading to level 10, its speed boost increased from 30 km per hour to 120 km per hour. With the wind-fire wheel, the train's maximum speed could now reach 462 km per hour. The base speed of a level 4 train was 160 km per hour. He had calculated that even if he upgraded the special bunny cloud wheel to level 10 and combined it with the nitrogen tailjet, the speed would still fall far short of 650 km per hour. The threshold for takeoff. To meet the takeoff condition, the train's maximum speed must reach that critical point while equipped with the bunny cloud wheel. The bunny cloud wheel's speed boost effect was inferior to the wind-fire wheel, but it allowed the train to fly. To reach 650 km per hour, they would need additional speed-boosting components or to upgrade the nitrogen tailjet to a much higher level. Of course, after reaching level 10, the nitrogen tailjet had gained 2 supermodel effects. Nitrogen tailjet level 5 supermodel effect, energy consumption halved. Nitrogen tailjet level 10 supermodel effect, merge into 1, speed skyrockets. The train's generator and the energy stone in the locomotive had already been upgraded to level 2. Tonight, using the nitrogen tailjet to cook had consumed about 1% of the level 2 energy stone in the generator. Not too energy intensive. It was acceptable. Like the train blade, the nitrogen tailjet was a whole component system. Once crafted, all new ordinary carriages would come equipped with 4 nitrogen tailjets installed on each side. Upgrading one would upgrade them all, unlike the armor, which needed to be upgraded individually. Aside from the locomotive, each carriage had 4 nitrogen tailjets. 2 on each side. The level 10 supermodel effect allowed all the nitrogen tailjets on the train's exterior to merge into 1, forming 2 massive nitrogen tailjets that ran along both sides of the train. This would unleash even greater thrust, resulting in faster acceleration. The effect depended on the energy stone consumed. This component was quite useful. Chen Ming smiled as he looked at the other components on the train's control console. Among the components unlocked after reaching level 4, he had only upgraded the acrobatic console and the train ticket. The others had only been crafted, not upgraded. Hell-Gatling gun, not needed for now. His current attack methods were sufficient. Adding this wouldn't make much of a difference, and it would likely be too expensive to maintain. Energy shield, not needed yet. This could only block energy attacks. Against physical attacks, it needed to activate its supermodel effect, making it far inferior to his armor. As long as the attack's level didn't exceed his armor's, it would be completely immune. No matter the level. Radar blocker, this was quite useful, but the train was short on iron ore for now, so it would have to wait. He wasn't afraid of being discovered at the moment. Even if he couldn't win a fight, he could always escape. No one could stop him. Very few could match his speed. Even if someone was faster, he could just drill underground. No one could match his speed underground unless they were willing to spend a lot of Murphy stones on drill bits. As for the train ticket component, he had upgraded it to level 10. Mainly because it was cheap. Upgrading to level 10 only cost 4,400 units of iron ore. Less than the resources spent on tonight's pork and vermicelli stew. Those people probably had no idea that the resources used for tonight's meal could have fed them for days. How extravagant. In the apocalypse, where else could a slave eat something like this? When he was a slave, Master Kun had fed him such garbage. Damn it, the more he thought about it, the angrier he got. And they still wanted to offer incense? Go to hell and eat moldy bread slices. Chapter 122, Train Elevator. Chen Ming shook his head, clearing his mind of scattered thoughts, before turning his attention to the train ticket accessory displayed on the control panel screen. Although it was of white rarity, it was actually quite useful. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared among the craftable accessories for a level 4 train. He had come to realize that as levels increased, relying solely on rapid upgrades to stay ahead of other trains and survive longer was no longer feasible. One had to venture into fortuitous encounter maps or defeat bosses to obtain rare blueprints to truly gain an edge. The effect of this accessory was the ability to produce train tickets. Guards on field missions could tear a train ticket and instantly teleport back to the train's bound location. The initial teleportation range was 1,000 meters, and it increased to 10,000 meters at level 10. This accessory could effectively ensure the safety of field personnel. Not bad. In situations where the train's fire support wasn't timely, this accessory could significantly reduce casualties. Additionally, 2 supermodel effects had been unlocked. Train ticket level 5 supermodel effect: if the teleportation fails, the first-person perspective of the user's last minute before death is transmitted back to the train. Train ticket level 10 supermodel effect: none. Overall, this accessory was quite good, though the only regret was the lack of a level 10 effect. He had hoped that if the accessory level was raised high enough, perhaps even to level 20 or 50, it might unlock something extraordinary. Perhaps an effect similar to Resurrection, where field personnel holding a train ticket could be instantly revived inside the train upon death. Now, it seemed that wasn't possible. But then again, such an effect was too fantastical, directly breaking the rules of life and death. Even the medical bay could only save severely injured people, not resurrect the dead. With this accessory, he could occasionally venture out. He could move within a 10,000-meter radius centered on the train, using the health staff to remotely control the train in case of danger, and if things got too risky, he could teleport back using the train ticket. Nice. Soon. The night passed, and it was a restful one, with everyone relaxing. At dawn, the stellar train set off again, heading west towards the city center to search for Yan Yao. For the stellar train, rescuing a survivor was simple, especially with a general description. The targeting radar screen clearly marked nearby life forms. It was worth noting. Along the way, the targeting radar showed very few survivors. Most had likely been scavenged by other trains or had fallen prey to monsters. Finally, the stellar train slowly entered the park, where approximately 13 standalone villas were nestled in a corner. Quite a few people. Chen Meng glanced at the targeting radar, which showed red dots in the basements of 7 villas. Did these wealthy people all have their own safe rooms? One villa even had over 30 people inside. He immediately called Ji Chuku over the walkie-talkie. Take a look at these 2 people and see which one is Yan Yao. Among the 7 villas, only 2 had a single red dot. According to Ji Chuku, Yan Yao should be in one of these 2. Neither. Ji Chuku shook her head, quickly scanning the real-time images around each red dot on the screen, before finally focusing on one villa. Lord Meng, this is Yan Yao. The woman next to her, I don't know who she is. Got it. Chen Meng nodded, looking at the villa with 2 red dots. Without saying much, he maneuvered the train into the villa area and came to a halt. Upon receiving the order, the Aozi and the others immediately jumped down, forming a cautious 3-3 formation with their soaring dragon assault rifles slung across their chests, quickly fanning out towards the villa. Although the eye had informed them that there was no danger ahead, it never hurt to be careful. Stay alert, the Aozi, tense, forcefully kicked open the slightly ajar door and looked inside the villa, which was covered in spiderwebs. The blurred footprints on the floor indicated that no one had been here for a long time. The first thing that caught their eye was the living room with a ceiling height of 10 meters. Under the once exquisite chandelier, a dried-up corpse swayed gently in the breeze. Damn it! The Aozi cursed under his breath, thoroughly spooked early in the morning. Even in the apocalypse, couldn't people choose a quicker way to die? Didn't they fear being devoured by monsters before they could even hang themselves? The corpse's legs were missing. The wounds had completely dried out and turned pale, with splatters of dried brownish-red blood on the floor beneath the corpse. The legs had likely been gnawed off by leaping monsters, leaving the rest out of reach. One thing about these monsters was certain. They consumed all human corpses, making this apocalypse at least free from outbreaks of plagues. Otherwise, with so many bodies in the summer heat, it would have been a disaster, directly doubling the apocalypse's difficulty. The Aozi shifted his gaze from the corpse. A middle-aged man. A pity, with his plump belly. The monsters had only managed to eat his legs, missing the most meaty part. The belly. The corpse was shriveled, but one could still vaguely see how much meat his belly once held. The villa's first floor had some blurred footprints. The second floor stairs had none. It seemed that the thugs who had previously looted this villa had only gone through the first floor, completely ignoring the rest. He could understand that. When he was a thug, he would have done the same, avoiding any place that looked eerie. The train conductor's goods were valuable. But his life was his own. Why risk it? Back in the day, if he had seen this scene at the villa's entrance, he wouldn't have stepped inside. Too creepy. But today was different. Biaozi led the way, following the eye's instructions in his mind, heading straight to the basement and towards the corner safe room. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary room, but he knocked on the wall. It was extremely thick, reinforced with plenty of steel. He tried pushing down on the door handle, then forcefully struck the lock with his rifle butt. It was a fake door. The real door was a security door behind the fake one. This was going to be tricky to get into. Biaozi frowned slightly, about to say something when he noticed a swarm of mechanical nanite spiders had somehow crawled into the basement, squeezing through the cracks of the security door. Seconds later, with a crisp sound, the security door slowly opened from the inside. He immediately pushed the door open and looked at the two women trembling in the corner, their faces pale, and said hoarsely, "Do you know Jichoku? She's Lord Mang's." At that moment, "My Jia." Shan Maozi, standing behind Biaozi, suddenly exclaimed, his voice trembling with excitement. "What are you doing here? I've been looking all over Ping City for you." Wait, Biaozi, slightly confused, looked at the two women who had been starved thin and frowned. "Are you saying the other woman is your friend?" Yes. Shan Maozi said excitedly. It's her, it's really her." Shan Maozi? One of the women hiding in the corner, upon hearing the familiar voice and confirming she wasn't mistaken, instantly teared up. She threw the dagger she had been clutching aside and rushed towards Shan Maozi, her voice trembling with sobs. "I never thought I'd see you before I died, I didn't either." All right, enough with the eyes and use," Biaozi sighed, interrupting their conversation. "We're on a mission here, keep it professional. You can talk more back on the train." Right, Shan Maozi realized he had been a bit too emotional. He took a deep breath, suppressing his feelings, and brought the woman to his side. "Can you walk?" Biaozi glanced at the pile of instant food wrappers in the safe room before addressing the woman who was shakily standing up. There was plenty of food in the room. And plenty left uneaten. They could take it all back to the train. It seemed they had enough food and water to last another 2 or 3 months. "I can walk." The tall woman in the corner stood up shakily and looked at Biaozi's tactical uniform. She took a deep breath. "My father is the head of the Special Operations Bureau in Sand River City. Did he send you to rescue me? Have all the monsters been wiped out?" Biaozi pursed his lips, shifting his gaze from the safe room. "The Special Operations Bureau, huh? If your father was a dedicated official, then his death anniversary is probably coming up. If he was a coward, he might still be alive. Lord Mang sent me. Follow me." He didn't say much to the woman. Who knew what her status on the train would be? If she couldn't walk, he'd have to call a couple of female residents to help her. The less said, the better. Fewer mistakes that way. But it seemed she hadn't yet grasped the reality that the world had officially entered the apocalypse. Her memories were still stuck at the outbreak's beginning, and it would take time for her to adjust. "You've got this trick up your sleeve?" In the Stellar Train's control room, Chen Meng looked at Zhai in surprise. "Why haven't you used it before?" Zhai's emotionless voice came through the robot's speaker. "I never had the chance before, and I only recently figured out how to use it this way. I can multitask control these mechanical nanite spiders to perform highly precise tasks, allowing them to do more than just repair accessories. However, I can only open relatively simple locks. For more complex ones, I'd need you to find lock-picking materials for me to learn from. But this is the limit of my computational power. I can only multitask control this number of mechanical nanite spiders, and while controlling them, I can't control other accessories." "Not bad," Chen Ming nodded, then turned his attention to the targeting radar on the screen. It showed that during the time they had been parked here, several people had sneaked up to the windows to observe them, but none had made a sound. It seemed these people didn't want to leave. At least until their food ran out, staying in the safe room was safer than being on the train. Though that didn't apply to his train. And he looked at the Doomsday marriage certificate in the drawer and smiled. An unexpected bonus. Shan Maozi's girlfriend, somehow, had made it from Ping City to the safe room in the Sand River City villa. Another 100 inheritance points. Though he hadn't used it yet. But both inheritance points and reputation points were things you couldn't acquire when you needed them the most. It was always good to stock up in advance. Now he had 200 inheritance points. At that moment, the train radio received a message from the Azure Dragon train captain. "Azure Dragon train captain, bro, are you ready? We might not be able to wait for your 2-week deadline. Plans have changed. We'll need to head to the Tower of Heaven by tomorrow at the latest." "Explain." "That fortuitous encounter map, the Tower of Heaven, officially opens tomorrow. A train elevator will descend from the sky to the ground. Even without the ability to climb 90-degree cliffs, you can still get up there. I thought it was an exploration-type fortuitous encounter map, but it turns out to be a competitive open map, just not open yet. I wondered how anyone could explore up there with such harsh conditions. I couldn't even do it, so who else could? This map doesn't allow level 6 trains. If you're going, bro, then we'll need to meet tomorrow morning and head there together. I'm in. Send the coordinates. Alright, meet at coordinates 391, 8192, 283 tomorrow morning. 3 parameters? Oh, right, I almost forgot. Your train can't fly, so you only need latitude and longitude, no altitude. Just meet at 391, 8192 on the ground. Chen Meng looked expressionlessly at the chat message on the train radio. Was this guy doing it on purpose? Even if his train could fly, would they really meet in the air? Just wait. It's not like he couldn't fly. He already had the bunny cloud. With a few more acceleration vehicle components, he could fly too. Then he'd set the coordinates at 391, 8192, 5000. This guy's maximum altitude was only 3000 meters, limited by the bunny cloud's wheel level. He'd definitely fly higher than this guy. Good. He hadn't had the chance to communicate closely with other trains. He couldn't keep working in isolation. Tomorrow, he'd see how other trains were developing and see if there was anything he could learn. Chapter 123, The Map of the Goblin Ruins Fortuitous Encounter. The supplies had been gathered. Chen Meng didn't linger in Sand River City for long. He steered the train out of the city and parked it on a plain. Along the way, he encountered another train, but upon spotting him from a distance, the other train detoured. In this world, most trains still prioritized peaceful development. Even if a mine was detected, as long as another train was already mining there, they would usually move on to search for a new mine. Normally, conflicts between trains carried far greater risks than rewards. However, if one could secure victory without risk, the rewards could be substantial. For example, the train that had been lying in wait for him outside the swamp for who knows how many days. He had just upgraded his missiles and some other components, and his iron ore reserves weren't abundant. After looting the resources from that train, the iron ore in his train panel reached 570,000 units. With this much iron ore, he could venture into the so-called Tower of Heaven. Even if he had to spend over 10 days inside, he wouldn't have to worry about energy or food shortages, though that might be a bit unrealistic. He also had 1.15 million units of copper ore. Enough to craft 3 level 6 missiles or 5 level 5 missiles. His development was more or less complete. It was time to explore. Night fell quickly. That night, Chen Meng parked the train on the Shay Plain, about 2 to 3 hours away from the coordinates. He planned to set off early the next morning. Inside the train, Chen Meng sat in the train's cabin, organizing the spoils from the past few days. First, there were the crocodiles he had killed in the swamp. The rewards from these crocodiles were pitiful. No blueprints, no special items, just some crocodile meat, which was similar to corpse meat. Useless, except perhaps for upgrading the flesh train or as a special material for certain components, like spider silk. From the train that had been lying in wait outside the swamp, aside from some iron ore, he had also scavenged 100,000 units of copper ore. It was thanks to these 100,000 units that his total copper ore reserves had reached 1.15 million. The rest were just everyday supplies and miscellaneous items. No blueprints or special items were found. Only one thing caught his attention. Special item, Goblin Ruins Fortuitous Encounter Map. Item effect, insert this map into the train auxiliary eye to view the specific coordinates of the fortuitous encounter. It was a card-like object. Entirely black with 4 large white characters outlined in gold, Goblin Ruins. It looked expensive. Very well designed, and it felt substantial in his hand. He tried inserting the card into a slot next to the train auxiliary eye on the control panel. Soon, a coordinate appeared on the screen, about 5 hours away from his current location, at the westernmost corner of the Shay Plain. Near the border of the Kunlun Mountains region. Chen Meng narrowed his eyes slightly. He was very interested in this Goblin Ruins Fortuitous Encounter map. He felt a strange connection with goblins. After coming out of the Tower of Heaven, he would check it out. The planet in this world was much larger than the one in his previous world. At least. In his previous world, it was rare to find such a vast plain with only one main city, surrounded by no trace of towns or villages. Every city seemed like an isolated fortress. The reason that train had initially evaded his targeting radar was likely because it had obtained something valuable from the Goblin Ruins. Back then, Doba's train had also managed to avoid his targeting radar. After finishing all this, he let out a light sigh, removed his clothes, and went to bed. We'll finally meet. Under the cover of night on the Shape Lane, inside the Azure Dragon train, the bald man was meticulously checking the integrity of various train components, including the stored resources. Fortuitous encounter maps were never without danger. He had to be fully prepared. He glanced at his level 5 energy shield and level 3 armor, both at 100% integrity. Perfectly fine. The rest of the firepower components were also in top condition. The train was stocked with 170,000 units of iron ore and 350,000 units of copper ore. More than enough. After all, his train was a well-equipped level 5 train. He was confident about the upcoming Tower of Heaven expedition. He knew of a dubious method where the levels of the energy shield and armor could be added together to achieve a higher defense level. For example, a level 2 energy shield plus level 3 armor could provide level 5 defense. This was equivalent to a level 5 energy shield but saved a lot of iron ore, as upgrading energy shields was expensive. However, the trade-off was significant. It was short-sighted and not a proper path. And initially, he had invited Chen Ming because, although he knew the coordinates, he had no means to reach the Tower of Heaven fortuitous encounter map. Tomorrow, the Tower of Heaven would officially open, and train elevators would descend from the sky to carry the trains up. He no longer needed Chen Ming. But he had still shared the information with Chen Ming. Partly as a gesture of goodwill. A train with S-class potential and 57. No, 68 supermodel effects was definitely worth befriending. Sigh. The bald man looked at the leaderboard showing the stellar train supermodel effects, which had now increased to 68, and let out a hopeless sigh. This guy was outrageous. Where did all those supermodel effects come from? The stellar train had been on the Shape Lane for a while now, yet no one on the train radio had spoken a single disrespectful word about it. Clearly, even though the stellar train was only level 4, no one wanted to provoke such a monster. It was indeed outrageous. As for the other reason, of course, he wanted to subtly settle a small grudge. Goodwill aside, he still had to make Chen Ming aware that he wasn't weak. It was just that Chen Ming was too strong. Inside the stellar train, Biaozi looked at Shan Maozi and his girlfriend, who were practically fused together, and couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. Shan Maozi, you lucky bastard. Even in the apocalypse, you managed to find your family. Shan Maozi's girlfriend wasn't stunningly beautiful, with faint freckles on her face. But the freckles didn't detract from her appearance. Instead, she had a delicate, charming look. A beauty among ordinary people. She'd score a 6 or 7 out of 10, especially since makeup wasn't a thing in the apocalypse. With a bit of light makeup, she'd easily hit 7 or 8. Hey. Shan Maozi hugged his girlfriend tightly, his eyes filled with excitement. Biauj, I've already explained the rules of the stellar train to her. From now on, she'll join everyone in mining, and we'll earn stellar coupons together, aiming to buy our own place on the stellar train as soon as possible. No rush. Biaozi shook his head. After being separated for so long, it was hard to say how much of their feelings remained. If they could smoothly receive the Doomsday marriage certificate from Lord Ming tomorrow, everything would be fine. Lord Ming might even start them off with level 1 resident treatment. But if they failed, they'd have to start from scratch. Didn't you ask her why she left without a word before the apocalypse? I did. Shan Maozi's eyes flashed with sadness, but he forced a smile. Just as train conductor Zhu guessed, she was diagnosed with ALS before the apocalypse. It's a terminal illness, almost incurable. Now, she has trouble speaking and doesn't have many years left. But in the apocalypse, every extra year of life is a bonus. When she can't mine anymore, I'll support her. I'll use stellar coupons to buy food for her. Biauj, don't worry, she won't drain the train's resources for nothing. ALS? Biaozi frowned as he looked at the woman in Shan Maozi's arms. Indeed, her body seemed a bit stiff. This disease was incurable. She was tough. If he had ALS and found himself in the apocalypse, he might have just ended it all. Where did she find the courage to keep living? How did you end up in Yan Yao's safe house? Biauj, the woman's voice was hoarse as she whispered, I don't know. I was in a village in Ping City when monsters started killing people everywhere. I just remember passing out, and when I woke up, I was in Sister Yan Yao's safe house. Alright, I see. Tonight, you'll share a bed with Shan Maozi. We'll discuss further after Lord Ming wakes up tomorrow. Biaozi paused, then looked at Shan Maozi with a serious expression. She's been in the safe house all this time and doesn't know much about the outside world. Shan Maozi, you must explain everything clearly to her. Many rules from peaceful times no longer apply here. The apocalypse has its own rules, and the stellar train has its own rules. If she breaks any rules, she'll die. Understand? I understand, Biauj, Shan Maozi replied solemnly, tightly gripping his girlfriend's hand as if afraid she might disappear again in the next second. Meanwhile, in the number 5 female advanced talent carriage, Yan Yao's face was pale, her expression one of disbelief as she stared at Jichaku. Jichaku, do you realize what you're saying? You're telling me this train is the best place to be in the apocalypse? Today, I saw many people crammed into a carriage with just a blanket on the floor. Some were even sleeping in the refrigerator, without mattresses, just lying on the ground. There were even women openly soliciting customers. And you call this train the only hope in the apocalypse? Jichaku. You weren't like this before. Jichaku's expression was complex as she looked at Yan Yao, a trace of jealousy and envy hidden deep in her eyes. She turned to gaze out the window at the starry sky, silent for a long time, before murmuring softly. Yan Yao, do you know how jealous I am of you? How envious. This chair you're sitting on, the bed beside it where you can lie down, the clean sheets and pillows, the ample food and water every day. Do you know that these things? I only got to enjoy them after coming to the stellar train? Do you know what my life was like in the early days of the apocalypse? Worse than a dog's. I didn't even dare to sleep, afraid I'd be torn to pieces by monsters in my dreams. And you? After the apocalypse, you didn't have to worry about food or monsters, hiding in your safe house until the stellar train came to rescue you. Go ask any member of this train, even those women you despise for soliciting customers. Ask them, and every single one will tell you how grateful they are to the stellar train. Before the stellar train, there was no such thing as soliciting customers. The stellar train gave them the right to do so. If you think the people in those carriages are crowded, I really wish you could see the other trains. It's so unfair, do you know that? I've suffered through so much, yet you've experienced none of it. But the fortune I've found, you've gotten it all. Before the apocalypse, it was the same. You had an official father backing you, and every time you faced trouble, I'd smile and shield you. After the apocalypse, it's even more so. Lord Ming will favor you even more, just because you're a virgin. But you don't realize any of this, taking it all for granted. Yan Yao's face was pale but resolute as she shook her head. Jichaku, I'm not stubborn. Perhaps the stellar train's conditions are indeed good in the apocalypse, but I'm still a lady. I can't accept using my body to serve Lord Mang. I'd rather go mining. Jichaku was silent for a long time before speaking softly. Are you sure? I'm sure. Of course, the stellar train gives everyone ample choice. Jichaku pulled out a walkie-talkie from under the table and spoke into it. Train conductor Zhu, please send someone to take Yan Yao to the rear carriages. She's chosen to go mining. What are you doing? Yan Yao's face changed. There are so many empty beds here. Can't I sleep here tonight? You? Jichaku shook her head, suddenly smiling. This is level 3 advanced talent treatment. You're currently a level 3 resident. This isn't where you should be. Forgot to mention. All residents must mine at least 10 units per day. Only by exceeding this can they enjoy the corresponding treatment benefits. If you fall short, the Oude will show you just how round his baton can swing. I'll mine. Yan Yao gritted her teeth, watching as several men pushed open the carriage door and entered. I, Yan Yao, would rather die than rely on my body to survive. The smile on Jichaku's face froze slightly before fading, her voice calm. No, you've got it wrong. As long as you mine diligently, you won't starve on the stellar train, and no one will kill you. You won't die. This place is much safer than your safe house. Chapter 124 Aren't you? Jichaku? Inside carriage number 5. After taking Yan Yao away, Lao walked in and smiled warmly at Jichaku, who was sitting by the bed. Looks like it didn't go well, huh? Wasn't this what you promised Lord Mang? Don't end up burning yourself in the process. He could naturally see through Jichaku's intentions. She had reached her limit and wanted to use Yan Yao to elevate her status on the train. However, it seemed things weren't progressing as smoothly as she had hoped. It's a bit troublesome. Jichaku shook her head, turning to look out the window. She hasn't experienced the apocalypse yet. Her mindset hasn't shifted. Give her some time, and she'll come around. Lao nodded. Just make sure you don't overdo it. Don't force anything if she is unwilling. Let her mine if she wants. Lord Meng doesn't like unnecessary complications, understand? Yes, I understand, train conductor Zhu. Good. Lao didn't say more and turned to leave the carriage. It was just a minor incident. Since Yan Yao was brought into the carriage, Lord Meng hadn't even asked about her, showing he didn't care much. She seemed more like an optional presence. If she obeyed, she could stay. If not, she'd be treated like any other resident. She could mine or sell herself. Soon, dawn broke. The bald man in the Azure Dragon train switched to the Windfire wheel, speeding toward the coordinates. The bunny cloud consumed too much energy. Flying over the Kunshan region was necessary due to the rough terrain, and it was safer in the air. But on the shape lane, using the windfire wheel was more efficient. Flying in the air would be pure stupidity, no matter how rich you were. Resources weren't meant to be wasted like that. However, when they were just a few minutes away from the coordinates, the Azure Dragon train gradually came to a halt. Several mechanical arms extended from the sides of the carriages, and within a minute, the wheels were replaced with bunny clouds. Then, as the nitrogen tail jets on both sides of the carriages ignited, the train surged forward, flying straight toward the coordinates. Not long after, he spotted the stellar train parked near the coordinates in his field of vision. He chuckled, then slowly maneuvered the train to land in front of the stellar train, leaning out of the window to wave. "Bro. It's me." Chenming expressionlessly looked at the train that had landed before him. His targeting radar had been upgraded to level 15, with a detection range of 15,000 meters. He had already spotted the Azure Dragon train on his radar. When it was over 10,000 meters away, it was still on the ground. After stopping for a minute, it flew over. It was clear. The bunny cloud must consume a lot of energy. But he didn't expose it, just sighed lightly. This guy acted like a child. "It's the apocalypse, are you playing house?" He also rolled down his window and leaned out to inspect the Azure Dragon train. "Long time no see. Nice train." "Not bad." The bald man chuckled. "Level 5 train, 22 carriages, over 600 slaves. Let's head out now. I'll lead the way. My train's faster, maxing out at over 500 on flat ground. I'll go slower. Just over 300. Alright." Neither of them got out of their trains, just poking their heads out to chat for a bit. After all, it was their first meeting. The Azure Dragon train captain didn't dare to step out alone for a chat. Most of a train captain's abilities came from the train. Leaving it would significantly increase the danger. Chenming didn't mind, even though he had the Hell staff to remotely control the train. But there was still danger. Bullets weren't slow. The two trains sped eastward across the shape lane, the opposite direction of the Kunlun Mountains, which lay to the west. The Tower of Heaven was to the east. About 3 hours later, the Azure Dragon train gradually slowed down and stopped in front of a Tower of Heaven. "We're here. We'll have to wait a bit." Chenming glanced at the message from the Azure Dragon train captain on the train radio and looked at the scene before him, feeling a hint of awe. The tower in front of him seemed to be 100 meters in diameter, like a giant utility pole. But it was more sci-fi. Its surface was transparent, revealing numerous gears of various shapes turning inside. Some gears were dozens of meters in diameter, turning slowly, while others were only a few centimeters, spinning rapidly. Looking up, the higher you went, the narrower the tower became. At the very top, it was only 10 meters wide, with a massive platform above it. The entire structure looked like an exaggeratedly proportioned golden mushroom. This was definitely not a pre-apocalypse creation. In front of the Tower of Heaven was a massive light curtain, resembling a regional boundary. Fortuitous encounter map, Tower of Heaven. Countdown to activation, 1:10 and 29 seconds. Maximum of 8 trains allowed to ascend and participate. Only level 5 and below trains permitted. No attacks allowed between trains in the yellow waiting area. No attacks allowed between members of different trains. Bro. The Azure Dragon train captain had already jumped off the train with his trusted aides and stood on the plane, pointing at the yellow circle in the distance, waving. "We're in the yellow waiting area now. It's safe here. You can come down. Let's go." Chenming picked up the walkie-talkie and whispered, "Lao, bring Biaozi down with you." Just then, Zhao Ai, who had been quietly standing in the corner of the train room, suddenly spoke up, "Train captain, I'd like to go down and take a look too." "You?" Chenming frowned slightly, about to refuse, but then thought better of it. He picked up the staff beside him, walked to the mirror to tidy up his appearance, then said, "Alright, let's go down together." Then he stepped off the train. "Bro." The bald man from the Azure Dragon train, along with his subordinates, immediately approached Chenming as he got off, his face full of smiles. "We've been communicating for so long, finally meeting in person. That maze design of yours was truly ingenious. I admire you, bro. I'm Dan. What should I call you?" Then, when his gaze fell on Chenming's clothes, he was slightly stunned. Weren't these also made on the clothing customization production line? Why did his clothes look so much better in quality? And that staff looked so luxurious. Moreover, this is the apocalypse. Why does this guy have an aura of detachment from the mundane world? His presence is extraordinary. He had been quite confident in his own attire, but now, for some reason, he felt a surge of inferiority. He subconsciously looked down at his own clothes. Could it be that this guy upgraded the clothing customization production line to have a supermodel effect? Just call me Chen Meng. Chen Meng, accompanied by Lao and the others, walked up to the bald man and smiled. Your head's pretty shiny, bro. Both being train captains, their auras were completely different. Indeed. It was all about money. His clothes were the result of a level 10 supermodel effect from the clothing customization production line, crafting high-precision clothes. That staff was also a special item, the Hell Staff. His body had been completely transformed in the medical bay, and with his already good looks and height, he stood out. Especially in the apocalypse. The contrast was even more striking. Only after stepping off the train could one truly feel the awe-inspiring presence of the transparent Tower of Heaven. Chen Meng looked up at the towering structure and the countless gears turning inside, thinking it looked incredibly cool. If only he could collect this. It would make a fantastic addition to his collection. Then he glanced around. Currently, only their 2 trains were in the yellow area. No other trains were in sight, and the targeting radar showed no other trains within range. Just the 2 of us? Yeah. The Azure Dragon train captain, Dan, nodded seriously. Not many know about the Tower of Heaven's activation. I've been keeping an eye on it. Plus, fortuitous encounter maps always have some danger. Many prefer to just mine safely, reducing the risk. Chen Meng. No matter how many trains show up later, let's stick to our agreement. If it's cooperative, we'll team up and split the rewards 50-50. If it's individual challenges, we'll each rely on our own skills. What do you say? Alright. What if it's adversarial? There are no adversarial fortuitous encounter maps. Dan shook his head. At least, I've never encountered or heard of any. At this point. Mom. Dan suddenly turned and shouted toward the train room, make some ice-cold beer. I'm treating my bro to a drink. Excuse me, everyone. My mother passed away early, so I named the Mom. It feels like she is still with me. I enjoy exploring fortuitous encounters, so I've gathered many interesting accessories, like this ice-cold beer production line. It's not very useful, but it improves quality of life. A door on one of the Azure Dragon train's carriages opened, and a beautiful woman in a short skirt walked out, carrying a tray with over a dozen cans of beer. Have a taste. It's been a while since you've had some, right? Dan enthusiastically invited Chen Meng and his group. Come on, try some. We've got some time left. Let's sit and enjoy. In the apocalypse, moments like this are rare. These are indeed accessories-produced beers. No harm. Also, train captain, could you ask Dan if his train has a level potential? I'm quite curious. Chen Meng ignored the message from the eye in his mind and, without putting on any airs, sat cross-legged on the ground like Dan and the others, opening a beer and taking a hearty sip. Bro, let me tell you, that maze of yours. Though this guy seemed a bit showy. They clicked well and had a good chat. Lao and the others also gathered with Dan's subordinates, chatting away. The group sat cross-legged on the plain, none of them carrying any weapons. If it weren't for the 2 heavily armored trains parked on either side, it wouldn't look like the apocalypse at all. More like a peaceful spring outing. But the several gun turrets mounted outside the carriages brought the atmosphere back to the apocalypse. Bro. After 2 cans of beer, Dan wasn't drunk but was in high spirits. He looked at Chen Meng seriously. We really hit it off. Here's the thing, I know the stellar train has S-level potential, but it's only a level 4 train. It might lack some accessories. Later, I'll produce a few thousand more cans of beer and give them to you. Anytime you want to drink, just take them. But. Dan suddenly laughed, pulling the beautiful woman in the short skirt into his arms, winking, this woman, though, I can't give to you. She's mine. How about it? She's pretty, right? Having such a beauty in the apocalypse isn't easy. Call him Lord Meng. The woman in Dan's arms obediently whispered, Lord Meng. Chen Meng, sitting cross-legged on the ground, couldn't help but sigh again. This guy was always showing off. Who asked for your woman? Really? He glanced at Lao beside him. Though Lao was chatting with others, his attention had been on this side. He immediately understood and nodded slightly, taking out the walkie-talkie and whispering a few words. The next moment, the door of carriage number 5 on the stellar train opened. Ji Chuku, in a red evening gown, with bright eyes and white teeth, stood at the door, gracefully waving to everyone. She walked elegantly to the group, knelt beside Chen Meng, and smiled without saying a word. Then she took out a cigar, quietly lit it, and handed it to Chen Meng with both hands. She looked both stunning and obedient. Oh. Chen Meng took the cigar, pinching it between his fingers, and smiled at Dan. No worries. A friend's wife is off limits. How could I take your woman? Keep her for yourself. This cigar was one of 7 he had seized from a train outside the swamp. He didn't like smoking them, but they added a certain flair. Huh? Dan, who had been all smiles, froze at this sight, his eyes filled with disbelief and shock. His voice rose involuntarily. Aren't you Jichaku? The top-tier celebrity, the C-position guest on the hottest pre-apocalypse variety show Sisters, please step up. That's me. Jichaku, kneeling beside Chen Meng, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and smiled radiantly. Thanks to Lord Ming taking me in, I have a place to call home in the apocalypse. Dan's eyes flashed with confusion. He looked at Jichaku in her stunning red evening gown, exuding elegance and nobility beside Chen Meng, then at the woman in the short skirt by his side. They were not on the same level. After a long pause, he forced a stiff smile, his face somewhat embarrassed as he looked at Chen Meng. Bro, you're living the good life. Chapter 125, Can I apply to withdraw? He's done playing. Not bad. Chen Meng couldn't help but laugh, pulling Jichaku into his arms and glancing at the woman in the mini-skirt next to Dan. Bro, you seem well-fed too. Can I still get those beers we talked about earlier? Of course, why not? Dan spoke with a serious expression. A bottle of beer is just 1 unit of iron ore. Dan, don't lack such things. Someone, move these to the stellar train. The next moment, the carriage of the Azure Dragon train opened, and dozens of slaves jumped off, carrying crates of beer toward the stellar train. Meanwhile, the stellar train's carriage also opened, and under Biaozi's direction, a group of train residents jumped off to receive the beer and toss it onto the train. This. Dan, who was about to say something, looked at the group of slaves from the stellar train and suddenly flashed a look of shock. After a long pause, he murmured, Bro, how come your slaves all look so healthy? That. Chen Meng clicked his tongue. How should he explain this? He couldn't exactly say that the bread and other things he gave them could enhance their physical fitness and supply essential vitamins. Maybe it's because I feed them well. How many people die on average each month from mining in your place? Die? None. No one gets sick? Nope. How's that possible? Are your slaves made of iron or something? Bro. A slave from the Azure Dragon train, who was carrying a crate of beer to hand to a slave from the stellar train, suddenly looked alarmed and whispered, Are you crazy? Your train conductor is sitting right there. How dare you smoke so openly as a slave? If the thugs find out you've been hiding cigarettes, you're dead. Huh? The man who had jumped off the stellar train was momentarily stunned before he realized what was happening. He exhaled a puff of smoke casually and laughed. What are you talking about? I'm not a slave. I'm a level 1 resident now. This cigarette was bought with stellar coupons. Why can't I smoke it? Just hand me the beer. Level 1 resident treatment? What does that mean? It means we can earn stellar coupons from mining, and then use them to buy things on the train, like cigarettes, houses, and... Wait, what do you mean by houses? I can't say. There are rules on the train. I can't reveal classified information. This is classified. But yeah, we have them. Don't your thugs whip you to make you work? Why would we need someone to whip us to work? Huh? Don't you get tired? Tired? The man from the stellar train thought for a moment before holding up the crate of beer the slave had handed him with one hand. This is also classified. I can't tell you. But my physical condition keeps improving. I don't feel tired at all. I even have cola every day. I've got endless energy. Cola? Yeah, that's classified too. Why is everything classified? I didn't think about it until you asked. But yeah, it seems like everything's classified. At first, it was tiring, but it got much better later. It's way better than when I was on other trains. Plus, we have something to look forward to. The man's eyes were filled with satisfaction and pride as he smiled and said, Our treatment keeps improving. We can use the stellar coupons we earn to buy assets on the train. We can even find a wife and start a family again in this apocalypse. Do you have something to look forward to? Yeah, I look forward to dying sooner. The slave from the Azure Dragon train cautiously glanced at his train conductor, who was sitting cross-legged not far away, then lowered his voice, his eyes filled with longing and urgency. Can I join your train? The man thought for a moment before turning his head to look at Lord Ming not far away. I'm afraid that's not possible. It could lead to war, and I don't have the authority to decide. I see. The slave from the Azure Dragon train gritted his teeth and glanced back at the other slaves from the Azure Dragon train, whose eyes were also red. He whispered urgently, All of us want to join the stellar train. Can you ask your train conductor? If it's possible, we'll start a riot from within as soon as you attack. The bullets are all stored in carriage 2. When the time comes, we'll rush to carriage 2 and blow it up. You can take advantage of the chaos to attack. This. The man was stunned for a moment before his expression turned serious. Wait here. I'll pass this message to Biaoj. Alright, I'll wait for your signal. Chen Meng's face remained expressionless as Biaozi whispered the report into his ear. His lips twitched slightly, and he sighed as he looked at Dan, who was still in shock. Buddy, wise up. Can't you see the look in your slave's eyes? He then waved his hand, signaling Biaozi to reject the proposal. At this moment, Dan finally snapped out of his daze and murmured, Bro. Did your train change its system? Your slaves all seem so motivated, nothing like the oppressed ones I have. Yeah, we changed it. Can you tell me about it? Of course. Half an hour later. Dan frowned deeply, pondering Chen Meng's words. It might be a bit more complicated, but it seemed much better than the slave system. The people on the stellar train were clearly full of energy, unlike his own slaves, who were lifeless. Especially. Under this system, the slaves' enthusiasm for work was much higher. The slaves on the stellar train even worked up to 17 or 18 hours a day. Moreover, Chen Meng hadn't held back. He'd even told him about the bread slices that could enhance physical fitness and the cola that restored energy. But where would he get the Murphy stones to upgrade these 2 white life modules? Even if he had them, he wouldn't waste them on white life modules. After a long pause, Dan shook his head with a bitter smile. Bro, I can't use your system. You've got too many supermodel effects. I don't have nearly as many. Someone like you is truly one of a kind in this apocalypse. Now I'm worried that after my slaves interact with yours, they'll all want to join the stellar train. That's true. Chen Meng nodded in agreement. Without so many supermodel effects, an ordinary person would have been exhausted working like this long ago. That's why I told you from the start. This system isn't exactly classified. It's not a big deal to share it. But without the proper life modules, it's hard to implement. Right. Dan nodded, frowning as he thought deeply. But it's given me some inspiration. I'll go back and see if I can come up with some incentive system too. Then. He took a deep breath, his eyes filled with admiration and helplessness as he looked at Chen Meng. I've made a fool of myself in front of you, bro. I lost some face in your maze. I came here to vent, but I didn't expect that even though you're only a level 4 train, you're stronger than me in every way. No wonder you're the first mechanical train with S-grade potential in the shape lane. Even in terms of women, I can't compare. At that moment, the door of carriage 5 opened again, and Yan Yao, wearing a tank dress, walked down with a smile. She went to Chen Meng's side and knelt down, her voice filled with shyness as she whispered, Lord Meng. Yan Yao? Dan's eyes flashed with shock again. You're that celebrity from the entertainment industry with the big background? You. Chen Meng, you. But the most stunned wasn't Dan. It was Ji Chaku. Ji Chaku looked at Yan Yao, who was sitting on the other side of Lord Meng, completely bewildered. She was even wearing her clothes. Didn't you say last night that you'd rather go mining? How did you change so much in just one night? Soon, Ji Chaku figured it out. She gritted her teeth, cursing in her heart, calling her a scheming bitch. She even took a shower and used her lipstick. Are you out of your mind? Chen Meng glanced at Yan Yao, who was kneeling beside him, and gave her a once-over. Her beauty was on par with Ji Chaku's, but while Ji Chaku's beauty evoked a sense of pity, Yan Yao's was more aloof. He then looked at Dan, whose jaw was practically on the floor, and couldn't help but laugh. You know them too? They're big celebrities. Who doesn't know them? Not bad. Chen Meng glanced at the countdown on the screen. The countdown's almost up. Looks like it's just our 2 trains this time. Let's head back. With that, he stood up, bid farewell to Dan, and walked toward the train cabin with Jai, leaning on his cane. The others returned to their respective carriages. What's going on with you? Inside carriage 5, Ji Chaku crossed her arms and looked at Yan Yao in disbelief, unable to stop herself from raising her voice. Are you out of your mind? Didn't you say last night that you'd rather go mining? Yan Yao lowered her head, a bit embarrassed. I admit I was a bit stubborn last night. There were too many people in the refrigerator. I couldn't sleep all night. I thought. It's more comfortable staying in this carriage. Why did you decide to calm down? After the residence carriage opened, I saw you sitting next to Lord Meng. I thought if I went down too, Lord Meng would look even more impressive, and he'd probably like me more. Plus, it was my first time seeing him. He's much more handsome than I imagined. So I went to your carriage, took a shower, and put on your clothes before coming down. Wait. Ji Chaku took a deep breath, still unable to understand. Did someone give you advice? Yeah. Yan Yao threw herself into Ji Chaku's arms, her eyes filled with guilt as she gently bit Ji Chaku's ear. A minor celebrity from before the apocalypse gave me some advice. Then I found out that you were the one who begged Lord Mang to come to Sand River City to save me. Thank you. If it weren't for you, I'd have been waiting to die after the food ran out. Good that you know. Ji Chuka pushed Yan Yao away, annoyed. Do you know how much courage it took for me to beg Lord Mang? After saving you, you were still reluctant. You need to adjust your attitude. So what now? Yan Yao hesitated. Should I go report to Lord Mang? No, he'll call for you when he needs you. Does Lord Mang like you? He likes me. Lord Mang has only called for me. I mean romantically. Ji Chuka looked at Yan Yao in disbelief. Are you out of your mind? Don't tell me you've decided after one night to climb the ranks and become the second in command? If you've got the skills, fine, but I'm worried you'll get yourself killed. This is the apocalypse, people die. You don't think that if you divorce, you'll get half the assets, or if you break up, you'll get half the train, do you? No, I'm just asking. I'm not that stupid, Chuku. Does Lord Mang have any quirks? Yeah, he likes watching variety shows. Sitting in the train cabin, Chen Meng calmly watched the countdown on the screen approach 0. The moment it hit 0, the countless gears in the Tower of Heaven suddenly stopped turning, and a crisp clicking sound rang out. After a 3-second pause, the gears began to spin wildly again. Then, on the massive platform at the top of the Tower of Heaven, 8 large platforms suspended by steel cables slowly descended from the sky until they touched the ground. Chen Meng exchanged a glance with Erdan, who was in the Azure Dragon train's cabin. Then, they each maneuvered their trains onto the platforms in front of them. The platforms were long enough to accommodate trains with over 30 carriages. Once the trains were in place, several clamps emerged from the bottom of the platforms, firmly securing the train wheels. After a 3-minute wait, the platforms began to rise slowly. Chen Meng looked out the window at the shrinking scenery, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness about what awaited them on the platform above the Tower of Heaven. This was his first time entering a fortuitous encounter map, so he couldn't help but feel a bit tense. About 5 minutes later, the platforms, pulled by the steel cables, ascended to the 5,000-meter-high platform. With the sound of gears, the platforms seamlessly merged with the platform, leaving no visible gaps. The clamps on the platform slowly retracted. They had officially arrived at the top of the Tower of Heaven. This was the fortuitous encounter map of the Tower of Heaven. Huh? Sitting in the train cabin, Chen Meng narrowed his eyes as he took in the scenery on the platform. The first thing that caught his eye were 8 straight, long roads designed for trains, stretching several hundred meters. At the end of these roads was a massive mechanical city. A city composed of countless mechanical parts, gears, and more. It appeared long abandoned, devoid of any signs of life. The first impression was desolation. The second impression was power. On the countless skyscrapers of this mechanical city, one could clearly see numerous massive anti-aircraft guns mounted on the rooftops. However, it seemed as if the city had suffered a devastating attack, with many buildings collapsed into ruins. Not a single corpse was in sight. Nor was there any greenery. If a city has no greenery, it exudes an overwhelming sense of coldness. This city was exactly that. Phew. Chen Meng exhaled softly, his hands resting on the control stick. If the mission of this fortuitous encounter map was to navigate through this fully armed mechanical city, then he only had one thing to say. Can I apply to withdraw? He's done playing. Chapter 126, I believe in you, just give me the conclusion. At that moment, a massive light screen appeared in the sky above the mechanical city. The fortuitous encounter map, Tower of Heaven, has officially opened. Maximum capacity of trains is 8, participating trains, 2. This fortuitous encounter map has a total of 5 levels. The difficulty of each level increases progressively, from D, C, B, A, to S. Each level cleared will grant a reward for the clearance. The first level is D-level difficulty, Doomsday Sprint. In the next instant, the traffic lights situated beside the 8 roads suddenly began to flicker. When the green light emerged and remained lit, the previously foggy mechanical city seemed to come alive in an instant, with all the lights turning on simultaneously. The entire city was instantly enveloped in neon lights. From behind the Azure Dragon train and the Stellar train, 2 platforms slowly rose. On these platforms stood 2 mechs, each wielding a heavy sword. Each mech stood a towering 10 meters tall, exuding an overwhelming presence. Without the slightest hesitation, Chen Meng pushed the control lever to its limit. Accompanied by a roaring sound, the train's speed rapidly increased as it shot down the asphalt road towards the mechanical city. Meanwhile, several lines of text flashed quickly on the control screen. This mech model is the Stellar Gen 3 mech. The heavy sword it wields can pierce level 7 defense, and the mech itself also boasts level 7 defense. Reaching the finish line within 10 minutes means a successful clearance. At the same time, several routes appeared on the screen, serving as navigation for this fortuitous encounter map. Zhao voice urgently echoed inside the train. Choose the third route. Chen Meng, in the control room, looked ahead at the approaching fork in the road. Without hesitation, he steered the train onto the rightmost route, entering the interior of the mechanical city. Tall buildings made of mechanical parts swiftly passed by on both sides. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of violent collisions rang out. Even with the universal wheels, which allowed for tighter turns, the rear of the train still slammed into the walls due to the high speed, creating a trail of sparks and flashes. Thanks to the armor, the train remained undamaged. With the permanent shock absorption, the passengers inside didn't feel their heads buzzing. At this moment, Zhao finally had the chance to explain. The third route has a 50-meter wide cliff. The train can completely cross it using spider silk. Compared to the other routes, this one is the optimal choice. The first route. No need to explain. Chen Ming interrupted Zhao. I believe in you, just give me the conclusion. He then glanced at the rear-view mirror, where the pursuing mech, towering like a small building and wielding a heavy sword, was rapidly closing in. Chen Ming licked his lips, adrenaline surging, and couldn't help but grin. I like this map. He then firmly pressed a button on the control panel. Immediately after, from car 12, 8 repeating ballistas were pushed out by the lifting platform. The ballistas quickly adjusted, and with a piercing whistling sound, 8 bolts shot towards the pursuing mech. They hit their mark. However, the 8 bolts, upon impact, didn't even scratch the mech's paint, let alone cause any damage. They simply lost momentum and fell to the ground. This thing. Chen Ming suppressed the urge to test whether the train stunt could take down the mech. He just glanced somewhat dissatisfied at the 8 repeating ballistas on the train's 3D map. I'll replace you sooner or later. You're too useless. Level 7 defense. His train stunt might not be able to take it down. Although his drill bit and car blade are level overpowered, level overpowering only means they can penetrate defense. Whether they can actually cause damage is another matter. He felt they couldn't do much damage. But that heavy sword smashing into his train. That would be a direct hit every time. His armor couldn't block that. At this moment, a sinkhole suddenly appeared on the straight asphalt road ahead. However, the stellar train didn't slow down at all. As it approached the edge of the sinkhole, 2 strands of spider silk shot out and anchored on the other side, allowing the train to drive across. In the blink of an eye, it reached the other side of the sinkhole. It continued to speed down the asphalt road of the mechanical city, while the mech in the rear-view mirror simply bent its knee slightly and made a huge leap, effortlessly keeping up. Impressive. Chen Meng calmly continued to look ahead. A leap that could cover 50 meters. Quite the jump. Choose the second route ahead. Another fork in the road appeared. Chen Meng steered the stellar train onto the second route. As soon as it entered this street, he saw a massive corpse tied in the distance, charging forward with ferocious expressions, almost completely filling the street. They were all level 1 and 2 zombies. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The car blades on both sides of the train, as well as the drill bit at the front, quickly extended and began spinning at high speed. The stellar train continued at full speed, crashing into the corpse tide. Upon contact, numerous zombie limbs were flung into the air, and sticky blood splattered across the windshield, completely blocking the view. Chen Meng frowned slightly. He'd have to get a windshield wiper or something in the future. But for now, he couldn't worry about that. He immediately climbed up through the sunroof and onto the roof of the train, sitting on the front and holding his cane, using his mind to take over control. The overwhelming stench of blood hit him instantly. Any zombie that got close to the train was instantly torn into pieces, unable to cause the slightest damage to the train. He looked back. The mech was still charging forward on the blood-soaked asphalt road, closely following. This mech had no ranged weapons, only the heavy sword in its hand. Prepare to jump. The width is 150 meters. At maximum speed, the spider legs can cover 155 meters. Just enough. From inside the train, Zhao voice roared. At this moment, another sinkhole appeared in the distance at the end of the road. This one was over 150 meters wide, exceeding the range of the spider silk, which could only shoot 100 meters. However, as the train approached the edge of the sinkhole, the wheels instantly switched to spider legs. Using the momentum, the train leaped from the edge, soaring into the air. When it landed again, it crashed heavily on the other side of the sinkhole and continued speeding down the asphalt road. 3 seconds later, Chen Meng saw the finish line. A square surrounded by a yellow circle. As the train rushed into it, it felt like entering a thick, viscous air. The train, which had been moving at high speed, instantly came to a halt. The Azure Dragon train had already arrived first and was waiting for him. The control screen also displayed several lines of text. First level, successfully cleared. Reward for this level, 10,000 units of iron ore. The second level will begin in 10 minutes. Chen Meng looked in the rearview mirror at the mech, which had silently turned back after he entered the finish line. He then sat on the roof of the train and looked down through the sunroof at Zhai. Tell Lao to send someone to clean the front of the train. He then turned to Dan, who was grinning beside him. Pretty fast. Not bad, Dan, inside the train, stuck his head out, a hint of pride in his smile. After all, it can fly. It's a level 5 train. Gotta have something you don't, right? Nice. He sat on the roof of the train, lit a cigarette, and looked around at the mechanical city made of mechanical parts. It was a spectacular sight, one he was seeing for the first time. Lao was already leading a team to clean the sticky blood off the windows. The train's basic accessories needed to be sorted out. Not even having a windshield wiper. This was unacceptable. 10 minutes quickly passed. The yellow circle gradually faded, and a light screen appeared before everyone once more. The screen displayed a line of text and 2 flat maze maps. Second level, sea level difficulty, mechanical maze. Reach the end of the maze within 10 minutes to successfully clear the level. You have 1 minute to memorize the maze's layout. The level will officially begin in 1 minute. At the same time, 2 dark entrances slowly appeared on a tall building in the square ahead. Clearly, these entrances were the maze's entrances. Li Shiji, come to the control room immediately. Almost as soon as the light screen appeared, the eye, controlling the train sound system, blasted the message at maximum volume into Li Shiji's ears as he was still leaning out the window, enjoying the scenery. Hearing the call, Li Shiji didn't hesitate for a second. He took off running towards the control room. He ran so fast that he tripped, but he didn't have time to worry about that. He scrambled on all fours towards the front of the train. Li Shiji rushed into the control room and looked at the 2 flat maze maps on the light screen outside the window. His brain worked furiously. With only 20 seconds left, the urgency made his lips tremble slightly, and his fingers twitched as he traced the air. Soon. The countdown ended. Did you memorize it? Chen Meng turned to Li Shiji. I memorized both maze maps. Which one is ours? The one on the right. You take the lead from here. Chen Meng suddenly remembered something. He picked up the train radio's intercom and found it still working. He turned to Dan, who was anxiously watching from inside the train, and frowned. Can you make it? If not, I can help you. Thank you. Dan's excited and hurried voice quickly came through the intercom. I've got a damn phobia of mazes now. Chen Meng didn't linger. He steered the train into the black entrance on the right side of the tall building. Inside, it was pitch black. When the headlights turned on, they revealed a large passage made of black steel. The passage was enormous, standing 10 meters tall, and the forks in the road were also wide enough to allow the train to turn even without universal wheels. Turn left. Li Shiji urgently called out as they approached a 3-way fork. He then glanced at the train's speed on the control screen and quickly spoke into the train radio intercom. Keep your train speed at 50 kilometers per hour. Not faster, not slower. In 3 seconds, you'll reach the first fork. Turn right. Then follow my lead. He then looked back at the passage ahead. Lord Meng, at the next fork, we'll turn right. 3 minutes later. Woo. With a honk, the stellar train successfully exited the maze and came to a stop on another square. The control screen displayed several lines of text. Second level, successfully cleared. Reward for this level, a random white tier accessory blueprint. Randomizing. Randomized to iris chip. The third level will begin in 10 minutes. P.S. All accessory blueprints obtained in this fortuitous encounter map can only be obtained through the Tower of Heaven fortuitous encounter map. Not bad. Chen Meng turned to Li Shiji, whose body was trembling slightly from the intense concentration. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. I can understand you memorizing the flat map, but you had no idea what was happening around Dan. How did you manage to direct him correctly? At this moment, the Azure Dragon train slowly emerged and pulled up beside him. Li Shiji, now relaxed, explained somewhat shyly. Although the 2 maze maps were different, the flat maps had scale markings. As long as the train conductor kept the speed at 50 kilometers per hour, the same as the stellar train, I could use the stellar train's progress to infer where the other train would be in its map. But I didn't know the specific rules, so I had that train arrive at the finish line a bit later. I'm not sure if there's any benefit, but it shouldn't hurt. Impressive. Chen Meng patted Li Shiji's shoulder and signaled for him to return. After this is over, there'll be a reward. He then turned to Zhai. With your computing power, couldn't you have memorized this maze's flat map and quickly deduced the path? Of course I could. Zhai's mechanical voice echoed in the control room, but you'd need to input the maze's flat map data into the train auxiliary eye first. That way, I can process it quickly. This robot's information reception equipment is too poor to absorb information quickly. However, there are many damaged machine parts here. Maybe we can find some components later to upgrade this robot. Then I'll be able to do it. My processing speed is fast, but my download speed is slow. At this moment, the train radio crackled with Herdan's excited and grateful voice. Bro, thank you, really. I've got a real phobia of mazes now. If it weren't for your help, I wouldn't have made it through this level. Chen Meng, sitting at the control panel, turned to Erdan on the Azure Dragon train and waved with a smile. No problem. If it weren't for you providing the coordinates, I wouldn't have made it here either. There are still several levels ahead. Let's keep going. Soon, the waiting time passed again, and the third level began. Another light screen appeared in the square. Third level, B-level difficulty, desperate enigma. Solve the riddle, find the way out. Time limit, 3 minutes. Immediately after. As soon as the light screen appeared, the sound of countless gears turning rang out. The two squares where the Stellar Train and the Azure Dragon Train were parked began to slowly rotate. With each rotation, the squares grew larger. They gradually split into two separate squares, separating the Stellar Train and the Azure Dragon Train. Then, numerous nozzles resembling stellar engines emerged from the ground at the edges of the two circular squares. A blast of cold air shot out, forming sharp, sword-like structures that pierced the sky. Chapter 127, Don't make it seem like we're small-time nobodies. Inside the Stellar Train, Chen Meng frowned as he looked at the circle of vents around the edges of the square. There were hundreds of them, and the icy cold air shooting up from them gathered together, forming a tightly sealed cylindrical structure several hundred meters tall. High above, at an altitude of several hundred meters, there was a much smaller square. That was the end point. At this moment, the countdown had already begun. 0:02 and 59 seconds. 3 minutes remaining. The edges of the square beneath the Stellar Train had already begun to collapse. When the countdown ended, the Stellar Train would plunge into a bottomless abyss. No one knew where it would fall, only the incessant creaking of countless gears turning could be heard from beneath the square. Falling down there would likely not result in anything good. Li Shiji, who had just returned to his seat, was quickly called out again. His face tense, he rapidly scanned the square. The only clue was the patterns on the square's floor. Within 3 minutes, they had to solve the puzzle and find a way to reach the square several hundred meters above them. That was the challenge of this level. 10 seconds later, Li Shiji's face began to pale rapidly. His hands trembled as he desperately examined the square, which had already partially collapsed at the edges, hoping to find the solution. But it was clear that his chances were slim. It's only a B-level difficulty. Is it really this hard? Chen Meng, sitting at the control panel, wasn't in a hurry. He calmly gazed at the cylindrical structure of icy cold air that enveloped the entire square. This thing wasn't a physical entity. There was no place for the spider legs to land. Zhao Ai, what about you? No good, Zhao Ai quickly shook his head. I don't have much learning material. There's no simulated space at all. Train conductor, you need to find me some materials to learn from. Just then, the train radio crackled with Erdan's hurried and excited voice. Bro, don't worry. I've already reached the top. Wait for me. I'll fly above you. I have a special steel cable that can hoist your train up. Chen Meng looked up and saw that the Azure Dragon train had already successfully flown above the square. Its energy shield enveloped the entire train as it prepared to charge through the cylindrical structure of icy cold air. This cylinder was sealed at the top, and the floating endpoint square was located near the top inside the cylinder. To escape this icy prison, they had to break through the cold air. No need, He had barely uttered a word when he saw the Azure Dragon train accelerate sharply and charge into the icy air. In an instant, frost enveloped the entire train, freezing it solid. It lost control in midair and crashed heavily back onto the square. Have a way. Only then did Chen Meng slowly finish his sentence. It wasn't that he spoke slowly. It was just that Erdan had acted too quickly, without hesitation. Chen Meng stared blankly at the Azure Dragon train, which had crashed heavily onto the square. If it hadn't upgraded its internal space stabilizer, everyone on board was probably dead. He grabbed the train radio's intercom. Are you dead? And not yet, just. Really cold. Erdan's trembling voice came through the train radio, along with the sound of his teeth chattering from the cold. Even through the radio, Chen Meng could feel the chill. A hint. I've retreated to the spectator seats. There's 1 minute left. Hurry and figure something out. Or we might die when we fall. Then, Chen Meng saw countless mechanical arms extend from the edges of the square, grabbing the Azure Dragon train, which had been frozen into a block of ice, and carrying it to the side. Numerous flamethrowers emerged and began to thaw it out. He glanced at the icy prison surrounding them. This thing was even more powerful than he had anticipated. Li Shiji still hadn't come up with an answer. It seemed they had no choice but to use that method. He sighed softly. It would cost 50,000 units of iron ore, which was a bit painful. After consuming 50,000 units of iron ore, he quickly crafted a level 3 energy stone and placed it in the generator. The stellar train then switched back to its spider legs. As the mechanical spider legs bent slightly, the rear sections of the train leapt into the air and stood upright on the ground. The middle sections followed suit. With 14 cars, the stellar train now stood straight up in the center of the square. It no longer looked like a train. It looked more like a rocket ready to launch. That guy. At this moment, the Azure Dragon train, which had already been eliminated in the 3rd level, was being carried to the side by mechanical arms and thawed with flamethrowers. Dan, who had been anxiously watching the stellar train on the control panel screen, was now relegated to the spectator seats. From here, he could only watch the progress of other contestants. Specifically, the stellar train. If they fell through the square inches this level, they would die. This was no joke. Beneath the square was a mass of wildly spinning gears. Falling down there would be disastrous. He had the bunny cloud to fly, but the stellar train couldn't fly. Unless they solved the puzzle in the last minute, they were doomed. And just then, he saw the stellar train perform a series of bizarre maneuvers. The entire train leapt into the air, and when it landed again, it stood upright in the center of the square. But that wasn't all. The nitrogen tail jets on each side of the stellar train's cars began to spew blue flames. That guy. Dan couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Is he really planning to launch his train like a rocket? Those are nitrogen tail jets. Even at level 10, the thrust wouldn't be enough to make the train fly. Hurry and think of something. You can't really die here. You're austere potential. There must be a way. Think of something. His face anxious, he stared intently at the stellar train standing upright on the square. The dozens of nitrogen tail jets around the train were already spewing blue flames, but the train showed no signs of lifting off. He had this accessory too, and he knew exactly how much speed it could provide. Even at level 10, it only added 120 km per hour to the train's speed. How could that be enough to launch it like a rocket? Just as he, shivering from the cold, couldn't resist picking up the train radio's intercom to say something. He witnessed a scene he would never forget for the rest of his life. The dozens of nitrogen tail jets on both sides of the stellar train suddenly began to expand, merging with the tail jets of the cars in front and behind them. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of tail jets fused together, forming 2 massive nitrogen tail jets embedded on either side of the train. They spanned the entire train, from the first car to the 14th. This. Witnessing this, Dan's mind flashed with an unbelievable possibility. Frozen in place, his voice trembling, he grabbed the train radio's intercom and shouted, "Are you serious? You can do that? You never said you could fly." Soon, Chen Meng's familiar chuckle came through the train radio. "I never said I couldn't." In the next moment, the square had already collapsed, leaving only a small patch at the center. The 2 massive nitrogen tail jets on either side of the stellar train began to tremble violently. Then, 2 enormous blue flames shot out from the tail jets, blasting the ground below. Boom! Under the immense thrust, the stellar train, standing upright on the ground, slowly rose into the air like a rocket, gradually accelerating. In the blink of an eye, it reached the top of the icy prison several hundred meters high. Then, as the nitrogen tail jets suddenly extinguished, the stellar train landed steadily on the endpoint square high above. Successfully landed. Level cleared. 3rd level, cleared. Reward, 1 random green tier accessory blueprint, rolling now. Detected that the previous level's reward was the iris chip blueprint. Obtained the matching mechanical eye blueprint. The 4th level will begin in 10 minutes. P.S. All accessory blueprints obtained in this fortuitous encounter map can only be acquired in the Tower of Heaven fortuitous encounter map. Phew. Inside the stellar train, Chen Meng leaned back in his chair and exhaled softly, smiling as he looked at the data on the control panel. Not bad. The consumption was less than he had expected. That level 3 energy stone only consumed 17%. This was definitely more costly than the bunny cloud, but that was to be expected. After all, the bunny cloud was designed to fly, whereas his method was cobbled together. First, he used the level 20 supermodel effect of the spider legs to make the stellar train stand upright on the square. Then, he used the level 10 supermodel effect of the nitrogen tail jets to merge all the tail jets into 2 massive nitrogen tail jets, achieving a rocket-like launch effect. The downside, aside from high energy consumption, was they couldn't control the direction. They couldn't fly wherever they wanted. They could only go straight up. But if it was about the shock factor, The bunny cloud couldn't even compare. Damn it. Inside the Azure Dragon train, Dan was still in shock, his mouth hanging open. It took him a while before he could shake his head with a bitter laugh. Before coming here, he had planned to vent his frustration. After all, he had been completely humiliated in the maze earlier. How could he not want to get back at them? From the moment they met, he had wanted to one-up the stellar train, but no matter what he compared, he couldn't win. The train environment, the women, even his most proud flying ability. None could match. As for attack and defense, he hadn't even considered those. With over 60 supermodel effects, how could they be lacking? In other words, his level 5 veteran train was completely outclassed by Chen Ming in every aspect. A total wipeout. Is this what austere potential is like? Isn't it a bit too terrifying? And he remembered that even for austere potential, aside from a red tier heavy firepower accessory and a train stunt, there weren't any other special perks. If that's the case, then it's not austere potential that's terrifying. It's Chen Ming who's terrifying. Whatever. He took a deep breath, picked up the train radio's intercom, and couldn't help but sneeze. Shivering from the cold, he stammered, the next level will be even harder. It's 8-tier difficulty. Even if I weren't in the spectator seats, it would be hard for me to clear it. The rewards for the later levels will definitely be better. That's the main event. Do your best to clear them all. Afterwards, I'll give you some beer. Just don't forget about me. Let me follow you and get a taste. Did we just fly? In Car 5, Yang Yao looked at Ji Chuko with wide eyes, full of shock. Isn't the Stellar a train? How can it fly? Can all trains in his world fly now? Of course not. Ji Chuko shook her head. After the apocalypse, trains became the only mobile shelters for all survivors to escape the monsters. How could everyone's train fly? It's just that Lord Meng is amazing. You haven't been to other trains. Seeing Lord Meng only makes you feel like a frog looking up at the moon from the bottom of a well. But when you've struggled through the apocalypse for a year and then see Lord Meng, you'll understand what it means for a mayfly to glimpse the vast sky. Do you think so many people are grateful to the Stellar just because of the treatment on the train? The biggest reason is they've witnessed the Stellar's power. They believe that following the Stellar will lead them to a brighter future, until they can establish an absolutely safe mobile shelter in this hopeless apocalypse. You're really lucky. After the apocalypse, you hid in a safe house for a year and then came to the Stellar. You don't truly realize how fortunate you are. That's what I envy most about you. It's truly unbelievable. In Guard Car 7, the Owzie looked out the window with a complex expression. The shocking scene from earlier still lingered in his mind, refusing to fade. For a moment, he even felt like he was riding a rocket. He had never imagined that one day he would get to ride a rocket. It is unbelievable. Lahu smiled as he looked out the window, his eyes filled with pride and nostalgia. He was the first to follow Lord Ming and had witnessed the Stellar's development from the very beginning. It felt good. He had poured so much sweat into this train. If one day he had to choose between sacrificing himself or the train, he would choose himself. He had came to regard the Stellar as his home. He couldn't imagine what his life would be like without it. Perhaps he would return to the same aimless, hopeless existence in the apocalypse, barely clinging to life. He didn't want to live like that again. Such a pity. Lahu suddenly shook his head regretfully. It's a pity the residents' cars don't have windows. They can't see what's happening outside. There are too many people, the Owzie said helplessly. Even if there were windows, only a few could see. And if everyone wanted to look, there'd be a risk of stampedes. Yeah. Lahu nodded with a smile. Maybe we can install some screens in the residents' cars later. When the Stellar shows its might, let everyone see. That way, they can truly feel the Stellar's power. Don't make it seem like we're small-time nobodies. Like any random loser can brag about being able to fly in front of us. Clearly, Lahu was still holding a grudge. He rolled his eyes in annoyance. At lunch today, that guy bragged about being able to fly right in front of Lord Meng. It made me so angry. Who doesn't know how? Damn it. Lord Meng is the real deal.